This dude can conjure anything out of thin air, like reality's his toy. He must be dirt poor, stuck in a cramped slum with nothing but hard luck. But food isn't an issue for him. He conjures it the second he needs it. No clothes at all? Honestly, that's not even an issue. Either way, he can just picture it in his head and bam, create it. What about his power? A hymn, straight from the source. So imagine he can pull off almost every skill. Basically, the sky's the limit with that kind of power. Now, hold up, I'm not spoiling the best parts yet. Let's jump into the story. Among the countless adventurers who clash with the raging monsters and save the land of El Dorado, there's one elite crew that stands on top of them all, the Heroes Party. And then, one guy from that party. Rick got shockingly booted out of their party. A month before, Heinz von Grandane, the Grandane Empire's second prince and the hero himself, gripped the moment and ordered Rick to hand over a replacement sword. Rod and Rick dropped to one knee and handed him one, because Rick von Newfield, the Newfield Viscount's second son, is a support mage. Layla snapped at Rick to not keep Heinz waiting, while Sasha leaned in and told Heinz to slow down and be way more careful. But he only smirked, then teased her by calling her a warrior. He burst forward with arrogant swagger at the Minotaur, grinning like it was guaranteed, because in his mind, there was no way any small fry could survive his swordsmanship. Yeah, it's the same old mess. He's pushing way too far, and right when it gets ugly, Rick kicks in Class 2, Windstorm and Might Magic to back up Heinz, who clicked his tongue, steamrolling his annoyance. The Minotaur reared its fists, but Heinz didn't even let it get started. He slashed it clean in half with one fierce swing. Everyone in the hero's party was blown away by him, except Sasha. She realized it was all Rick's magic, because without it, Heinz never would have been able to crush the Minotaur. Right on cue, Heinz shot Rick a furious glare, snapping that he'd probably crumble without his support magic, and ordering him to stop meddling unless it was absolutely necessary. Then, even though Rick had a just-in-case plan in his pocket, he bit his words, nodded along, and bowed like he meant it to avoid any trouble. Fennis, the archer, and yes, the one with that F, launched praise at Heinz and instantly swelled his ego. But then a magic circle flared under their feet, and Sasha shouted for them to back off because it was pure danger. But they couldn't budge at all, because the magic circle had already snapped to light. Then he slammed down a summoning magic circle and hauled in a whole wave of monsters. "Hurry," Rick urged. "Ride the tides!" But every second Heinz lingered inside the magic circle, his strength drained away like it was being stolen right out of him. Right as the Minotaur lifted its axe to smash Heinz and Fennis, right in the middle of them, Rick slipped in with Class 2 Windstorm magic, and Heinz Ketchup still had the nerve to gripe that he's way too slow. So yeah, Sasha tells everyone the summoned monsters have to be forcibly banished as soon as time runs out. But the real question is, can they last that long, especially when that so-called hero is begging to get rescued first? Then Rick slammed Class 3 healing magic onto Heinz, and Heinz snapped everyone to regroup, stay spread out, and wipe out the monsters one by one from the back. Did he really mean to unleash that opening? "All right," Rick snapped, "get up front!" Then he roared that he'd slam in with Class 2 and his Windstorm magic. Heinz shot Fennis a signal and told them to run the plan. He laid it all out first, then burst into action with her. She whirled around and fired an arrow tipped with a scent pouch straight at Rick, while Heinz flashed a smug grin and let Rick handle the rest, only for him to fail uselessly. Rick's eyes went wide with pure shock. Wait, they turned him into bait? He had no choice but to hammer through all those monsters, while the others bolted for the hills. Sasha was the only one left standing. She charged the monsters and fired off Class 3 flame arrow magic. But they refused to back down, just stood there and glared straight at her. Heinz tried to shut her down, but she refused to back off. She was set on helping Rick, and there was no way she could ignore what Heinz had done. She swore she'd report everything straight to the Emperor. Heinz spun around and told Layla to handle it, but Layla snatched Sasha and tried to haul her out, only for Sasha to fight back. Layla had to knock her out and haul her away, and Rick just stood there watching it happen, panicked, because were they really about to ditch him? Aren't they supposed to be comrades? He gritted his teeth and poured more magic into his barrier, forcing it to hold. And now he can't stop staring at what he ever did to deserve this. Is it because he comes from a Viscount's bloodline? Or because he's a bastard son? Or maybe it's the fact he's only a support mage. Whatever the reason, he's still going to survive. Right up until Class 2, windshield magic, and his barrier shatters anyway, unleashing those monsters to slam into him. Pain crushed through him like it was never going to let go. Right when he thought it was over, a brutal pulse of pain slammed through his head. Earth flickered across the screen. Japan, science, and then, bam! Truck-kun burst into view in a blur of images. Is this my memory? Or someone else's? Wait, Rick's memories? Yeah, he remembers everything now. And then a burst of light crashes down on him, glaring at just how pitiful he looks for going out like that. So yeah, he's not just some ordinary hero, right? Now hold up. More memories are snapping back into place. A voice blazed through the light, demanding, "Did you remember everything?" Rick nodded fast, answering the goddess as she abruptly appeared right in front of him. But the memories of how he died last time still feel blurry, like he's sealing them away without even realizing it, because it was too traumatic. The goddess reassured him, telling him he's okay and doesn't have to force himself to remember. But from the fuzzy flashes in his memory, it looks like he went down fighting to protect someone, only for the person he saved to die anyway. He let out a defeated sigh, then it hit. He died again. Or so it seemed, right? But the goddess stepped in and shocked him with the truth. He hadn't died at all. She stepped in with divine power because the gift she handed him still hasn't even been unleashed. First, Rick stared around, baffled. Didn't he get reincarnated and end up with support magic? Yeah, but he didn't just luck into it. He fought to earn that kind of power himself. It was supposed to kick in the moment he turned 16, but what she really handed him was this. Is creation, holy magic bursting into the world. It supercharges your existing spells and lets you conjure brand new things out of thin air. It's basically overpowered. Wait till the moment hits and you'll see it click in his head. But now it's time for him to awaken. So the goddess plants a kiss on the top of his head, sends him flying into the air, and Rick blurts his protests because he still has questions burning. But he has to turn back now because the goddess is basically begging that he'll finally find happiness in this life. Rick jolted upright with a sharp gasp, his eyes snapping open like a switch. He jolted upright, pressed his hand to his head and felt blood. Was this all just a nightmare? Yeah, no. Every monster that was circling him is down on the ground now. So you're telling me the divine intervention finally showed up? He's still trapped all around, but power is bursting out of him right now. And the moment he locks in on it, Sasha from right then, casting Class 2 flame arrow magic. But nah, he wants the fire cranked up even hotter, like those electric blue flames. Rick blasted off Class 3 flare genesis, then forged the flame arrow creation with holy magic. Every single one of them surged into the monsters surrounding him and melted their bodies with searing flames. Rick shot up to his feet. He crumpled to his knees, his whole body shaking uncontrollably. Yeah, it's not just strong, it gulps down power like crazy. Exhaustion finally snapped him out for good, right when Rick came to his senses, because he passed out on the spot, and he was sprawled there in Sasha's lap. She was sobbing and blurting out apologies over and over, and it looked like they'd finally made it back. Hines at the back snorted and said Rick was lucky to have survived. Then he smirked like it was all according to his plan, because hey, everyone got saved. And of course, his strategy was brilliant, just like the hero in his party who saves the world. Rick slowly shut his eyes, clinging to the goddess's words and forcing himself to believe he had to be happy. He couldn't stop wondering if she'd tell him to unleash the power he'd been given to save the world. It's been a few days now, and Rick is bouncing back fast after everything that happened. He sat on his bed staring out the window, wondering if he really still had a reason to stay with the hero's party, until a knock slammed against his door. Sasha pushed the door open and stepped inside, then sat on a chair by Rick's bed and asked how he felt. Rick shot back that he was completely fine now. Sasha let out a breath, cheeks burning, because the thought of Rick always swooping in for her wouldn't stop replaying in her head. Seeing Rick's puzzled face, Sasha leaned in and asked if he remembered the first time they met, because he definitely did. Who would have guessed she was a noble lady hiding in plain sight? Rick will never forget it. 4 years ago, just as Sasha was about to get kidnapped in town, he swooped in and saved her. Then Rick burst out laughing, teasing her about her outfit. And when he scratched his cheek, the memory hit him. He'd gotten beaten badly that same time, too. Sasha shot up, swearing he still looked totally cool. And as soon as the words hit her, her face burned red with instant embarrassment. She bolted out the door to get out of there, even though she'd sworn she'd come back later to check on him. Rick sat there totally lost. Then, once she was finally gone, his thoughts snapped back to that memory from 4 years ago. Back then, he was nothing but a commoner. But saving 2 daughters from a duke's household changed everything, and the Newfield family took him in as their second son. That's the real reason he even landed in the heroes' party, and why, even now, he can talk freely with Sasha. If he doesn't pull this off, he could lose his only friend, Sasha, straight up. And how noble is it to ditch the hero's party on his own? That choice could spiral into something way uglier, and on top of that, Heinz might just cook up a reason to toss him out of town. You know what happens if things go south. One wrong move, and the Emperor could come down on him hard. If he strolls in and says he's leaving the party, he might as well shake hands with the Grim Reaper, because the moment's still fatal either way, and that's way too risky. Guess he's got no choice. He's got to do it. In the present day, Rick hauled 2 overflowing sacks of luggage and grumbled about how he got stuck paying for everyone's fee. Heinz flat out said it was obvious because he's completely useless. Rick bolted to his side, snarling that his wallet was totally wiped out, and Heinz's face twisted in a brutal scowl because how dare he strut around with that cocky mouth after talking back to them, like he didn't even understand who he was dealing with. He's a prince, sure. Then he shoves Rick aside and Rick stumbles, wobbling out of control. And the second Fennis slipped that book out of the sack, he dropped into a crouch and snatched it up, ready to inspect it. But the second she cracked it open, their expressions went cold. She bolted to Heinz and thrust it into his hands. As he read the words inside, rage flared so hard his cheek veins swelled, and he snapped to Rick, demanding to know what it meant. Rick trembled through his own cursing and fury, raging like that was his everyday prayer, because now everyone could see what those exposed diaries had been screaming his whole time. If they find out, they'll kick him out. No way. He won't let it end like this. Even with the imperial decree in his favor, one whisper to the Emperor, and he's a dead man. So what happens to him now? Fennis stared as he face-planted, thinking he finally snapped, right? Meanwhile, Heinz just smirked. Yeah, fine. He'd grant the wish. And just like that, Rick got tossed out of the heroes' party. No questions, no second chances. Fennison and Layla don't mind at all. Honestly, they look downright thrilled. Even Sasha, the only person Rick actually cared about, had no choice but to fall in line with Heinz's command. Heinz shot Rick a smug smirk and warned him, in no uncertain terms, to never show up in front of them again. Again, he turned and left with the other party members. An old man stepped up to Rick, checking if he was all right, but the trembling Rick could barely speak, so he just thanked him for worrying, then hurried into an alleyway. There, he finally burst into the laugh he'd been choking back. He can't believe it. It actually worked. Now he's done dragging himself through more adventures with that selfish prince. Sasha's probably still fuming at him now, like, yeah, she definitely hates him. He set things in motion, so there's no stopping it now. But getting kicked out of the hero's party won't stay hidden from his family. Once Rick snapped back to his past life memories, he couldn't stand Heinz's control anymore, so he started behaving in a way that forced them to throw him out. He went through with it, and the plan paid off. But Gordo, the head of the house, refuses to stay quiet. If he thinks Rick's useless and cuts him out, then honestly, that's the best case scenario. So, should he just bolt right now and vanish? Hold up, if it looks like he sprinted, his mom's life is going to be on the line too, so he's got to bolt to Dordland right now. After 3 brutal days of marching, Rick finally burst into the Grand Dine Empire, Dordland. He's totally wiped out, but along the way he still got to unleash his Genesis magic, test it for real, and walk away with a ton of lessons. So yeah, it wasn't all bad. So what kind of performance is he supposed to pull off when his brain is fried and he's burned through way too many mana points? While he wandered without a thought, a girl suddenly popped up in front of him, box in hand. She collided with Rick with a smack of her butt, and he stumbled straight to the ground. She blurted an apology in full panic mode, but Rick snapped that it should have been him saying sorry instead. The girl just stared at him, totally baffled, like her eyes recognized him from somewhere, even if she couldn't place where. Suddenly, she dropped into a deep bow and flooded him with apologies. Then she finally spotted that one gold line on his collar, realizing he was from the Newfield house. Rick snapped his hands up, brushing it all off like it was nothing, saying she didn't have to worry since he was basically just a commoner now. To make things right, Rick jumped in and helped her load her carriage, then leaned in and asked if she needed anything else. But the girl just shook her head and said, "Nope, you've helped me enough." Rick ruffled her hair and cheered her on, praising how hard she worked to run errands for her family. Oh, she's already there? Why would he do something like that? Doesn't this feel way too familiar for a complete stranger? But once he heard her laugh instead of complaining, relief hit him like a wave. Maybe she didn't hate it that much after all. And just like that, she snapped out of it and insisted, "No, this isn't it." She'd actually come all this way to buy stock for her own shop, and Rick's jaw nearly dropped because he'd been convinced she was just a servant. But owning a shop this amazing, while she's cute enough to throw him into worry, still makes his heart race, and once more, she thanked him for helping her. She told him, "If you're ever in Zurich, come swing by my shop." And Rick's mind immediately latched onto one question. Was it the same shop that shows up in that Jolt commercial, right where his mother's family lives? Anyway, they shot each other one last look and said goodbye. He watched the carriage roll away. Then it hit him. He forgot to ask her name. Whatever, he muttered. And somehow, he just knew they'd cross paths again. Right then, a private carriage with a hawk crest rolled up behind him. He just stared, stunned. He couldn't process it. It's only been 3 days since he walked out of the party, right? A butler leapt down from the carriage, bowed low to Rick, and told him the young lady is waiting right this way. They show up fast, too, like clockwork, just as everyone expected. The 2 young girls he pulled out of danger 4 years ago, Sasha and Amelia, were the same ones standing there. The young lady the butler was talking about, her full name, Emilia von Runesaber, spoiled to perfection as the Duke of Runesaber's second daughter and somehow his fiancée to boot. Rick slumped across from Amelia, and she snapped, "Do you know what it means to get kicked out of the hero's party?" He nodded, because he understood perfectly. The Viscount family would cast him aside. Their engagement would get wiped clean, and since he'd started as a commoner anyway, he was just sliding right back to where he belonged. Amelia just pointed it out. He looked weirdly happy about it, like something inside him had snapped into place. His charm with her only worked because he was standing in the same party as the first prince, but now everything's gone, and he's left with absolutely nothing. She yanked her shoes off, barked a warning about his head, and demanded he drop to his knees. Rick nodded and dropped to one knee, so obedient it almost hurt, because she decided to finally give him a real shot. She hooked his chin with her foot, lifted his face, and warned him he could still stay noble as long as he followed through with their engagement. The Lord straight up ordered, "Don't let him through, right?" But if they're engaged, what difference does it make? Doesn't he know who she is? Of course he does. He's just refusing because that's not what he wants. She's not dragging him into anything. This is his choice to refuse, plain and simple. But he better think hard. Staying noble while dodging the Emperor's sights is a pretty sweet bargain, right? Yeah, getting disowned by Newfield is a sure thing. And if Heinz messes up, the Emperor himself might come hunting for him next. And honestly, it might not stop with him. His mom could get dragged into this too. Even then, what? He won't hesitate anymore. Rick yanked Amelia's foot down and snapped that she'd shamed herself. Amelia's cheeks flared red as she called after him, but he had already jumped off the carriage. Before he left, he bowed deeply to her, gratitude burning bright for every kind thing she'd ever done for him. Then he slammed the carriage door shut and left her pounding for answers from the inside. The butler marched up to Rick and demanded to know if he was really the one who chose this. Rick shot back a firm yes, and that answer lit a spark of resolve in him because their statuses were nothing alike. The butler got it too, but damn, it was still a real shame. Amelia's smile was in a league of its own, especially when she was right there with him. It was the kind of smile she never once let them see. Rick opened his mouth to speak, but the butler cut him off, bowed low, and sent him off with a final farewell. So Rick kept pushing forward, and at last he reached the new field household, only to realize it had been ages since he'd seen his real father. He's got a plan in his pocket, but can this spell-made fake gold really stand up to the real world? All right, he charges up to the gate, and the guards slam him to a stop. He stared at them, scratched the back of his head, and asked if they actually knew who Rick Vaughn Newfield was. Turns out he's the second son, so why are they treating him like trash? The guards say Lord Dieta ordered them to block him from passing, and yeah, he's fully aware. That's why he wants to talk to his brother, Dita. Right then, someone let out a sharp scoff. It was Didvon Newfield, the very first son of the mighty Newfield Viscount family. And whoa, Since Rick last saw him, he'd grown bigger, like he'd been quietly getting ready to blow everything up. Did grip the gate, yelling that he'd never let a commoner into their house from the very beginning. Rick brushed off his words, shoved the fake gold into his hands, and then, boom, that small gift was all for him. Did scoff at it? Did he honestly think this pathetic money could buy forgiveness? He tore open the sack and snatched a jar that looked downright suspicious. He accused Rick of snatching it from the mansion's medicine shelf and plotting to poison him, and Rick just froze, completely dumbfounded. He'd never touched that jar in his life. So yeah, this is what the guy's trying to pull, and honestly, it's brutal to believe they're even blood relatives. Suddenly, a commanding voice snapped, "Everyone, shut up!" It was Gordova Newfield, the Newfield Viscount's ruthless head and the lord of the Dordland territory. He ranted that Rick tried to poison him, spitting that it had to be because Rick hated that he was the rightful heir, then blamed Rick for forgetting Gordo's favor and trying to topple the Newfield family so he could seize the throne. And that jar he's clutching? Total proof, no doubt about it, and Rick can't stop smirking because it looks like they're already gearing up to throw him out. Gordo spun toward him and said, "So you've got some value?" Because in Heinz's eyes, he'd been stamped as incompetent, and the Duke's daughter even had his engagement ripped right out of his life. So yeah, he was just some kid from a low-born woman. Seriously, that's what Rick couldn't stand, and his scowl turned razor-sharp when that fat oaf had the nerve to insult his mother's birth. Then he yanked the gate, jaw clenched, and demanded they undo that insult right now. The real reason he's so useless is that the new bloodline coursing through him is messing everything up. Gordon slammed him with his staff, then spun away like he was done with the whole fight. He snapped that he was no longer tied to Newfield, so they needed to dump every scrap of evidence from their house and never let him see his face around them again. And yeah, he needs to get his mother out of this town too, because if he doesn't, he already knows exactly what's coming. Even after getting kicked out, Rick still flashed a grin like he'd won. This is beyond anything he dared to dream, because a noble's command is ironclad, and with it, he can finally pull his mother away without a single problem. Did stayed by the gate, laughing at Rick, and honestly, Rick totally deserved it. He'd hated him for ages, and there was no way he'd ever let himself believe he and his mother would slip out with their lives and bodies still intact. So yeah, this guy's about to hunt them down. And then boom, are we really about to see Rick drag his mother into this mess too? At the Empire's absolute lowest, in the filthy slums, Rick stalked the streets in nothing but a pair of shorts, completely exposed to the world. For him, it's like time just froze. This town looks the exact same, even smells exactly the same, like not a single thing has shifted in 4 whole years. He pulled up at that house on the far end, just like it lived in his memories, his mother's place, and they had to get out of town before. Ford's pursuers slam in behind him, no time to breathe. The only thing that matters is getting his mother out of here, somehow. Rick slammed his knuckles on the door, and the surprise hit him the second it opened. His mother, Mary, burst forward with pure excitement, throwing her arms around him to welcome him home. He's finally relieved. His mom looks healthy and fine, but then it hits him. How on earth did she know he was coming? She wiped her tears because, of course she did. She was so proud of her boy, now grown into this fine young man. Rick was about to tell her what really happened. It all kicked off when he suddenly sneezed. Maris froze, afraid he'd catch a cold, and hurried over with a cloth for him. It was the last thing they had left back home. Rick snatched it up, asked Maris if it was really okay, and she nodded. Yeah, it's fine quality cloth. Then she added, like it was obvious, that she'd probably treasured it for years. So in that case, he's using it as the raw material. He'll picture the perfect outfit for his mom. Then he'll tap her shoulder and use Class 2. Creation rolled out with holy magic, and in a flash the spell upgraded both their clothes. Then the cloth snapped around his shoulders like it was born for him. Mary stared in awe and said it was like real magic, because it was. He learned how to do it on his travels, and honestly, that was incredible. Now she's buzzing, thinking she might finally cook even better than before. She slid 2 steaming bowls of soup onto the table, and then the whole thing turned into a quick, no-stress recipe. Grab potatoes and some salted water, peel them, yank off any sprouts, chop them up, boil the water, salt it, drop the potatoes in, and wait until they soften. Done. Rick took a spoonful and immediately started doubting whether this soup was even edible. So, on second thought, forget the recipe. Seriously, don't try this at home, guys. It's not just his mom's cooking skill. Those veggies were grown on rough, poor land, and that harsh, salty taste hits like torture. Oh, wait, hold up. It's that thing. He pictured chicken bones and fragrant veggies simmering softly, skimming off the scum. Locking in on every step, then, after countless trial-and-error nights, it all clicked, and ta-ta, he rebuilt a dish from his old life. Class 2. Creation. Holy Magic Chicken Consumptions. He dropped the seasoning into his bowl and told Mary's he'd made it, then dared her to taste it once, even if she didn't buy his story. Her eyes lit up at the magic in it, and she agreed to try it on the spot without a single doubt. Rick shoved his bowl into her hands, and the second she took a bite, she went, "Wow, this soup is ridiculously good!" Packed with flavors that keep hitting one after another. She's absolutely obsessed with it, but there's only a tiny bit left. No way they're wasting it. Rick shoots her a reassuring grin and says, "Don't stress, I can make more whenever." Honestly, it's that good. She just wants Rick's grandpa and grandma to take a taste too. That's all. Rick seized this chance to get away with her, pushing her to hurry off and visit his grandparents, because he refused to let them worry, and he sure as hell wasn't going to waste words. She hasn't set foot back home in forever, has she? If she's really with him, maybe, just maybe, they can slip past the gates while he still holds his noble status. And that's when the real chance starts. Mary's nodded along, like she'd already decided. She just wanted to slip back home for herself. Rick snapped back in surprise, because from what he knew, commoners weren't supposed to move in and out of the country at all. And yet, she was talking like she could do it. Rick was still lost in his own thoughts when Mary suddenly stood up and demanded they leave now. He argued they should pack first, but she cut him off, saying there's no point since they barely owned a thing. Just then, they heard a voice tearing through the outside like it owned the night. He kept asking about Rick. Then it hit. It's done. And now we're hearing how the people sold Rick out. Did ordered his men to jump them, but Rick burst out and shut it down. They're pulling out of town exactly the way he demanded. So yeah, now he's gotta let these people go. But it only fanned the rage in him. He dared to issue orders to him. Rage boiled in him as he stomped around and hurled the fake gold coin bag Rick had handed him. He learns the truth, that they're forged, though he still says it like it's no big deal. Matt. Rick realized it wasn't him who sniffed out the lie. It was his servant who blew his top, then snapped and ordered his men to grab Rick. Really? You're just loud talking, no bite at all. The men cackled and cracked their knuckles as they closed in on Rick, warning him, try anything funny and they'll put his mother in danger. Rick spun around and saw it. His mother had been caught too, and the men started talking about what they'd do to her after they beat him, to which Rick's answer was just, yes, you can. A woman like her? She's filthy and downright revolting every single time. Just look at her. Doesn't she give off the vibe of someone slow on the uptake, no matter if she's a merchant's daughter or something else? If she'll crawl into bed with a guy she doesn't even love, then she's not built for anything real. She's for the streets. Rick snapped, screaming that he couldn't stomach the slander anymore. But Mary grabbed his arm and told him to let it go and forget it. He scoffed, laughing at the whole thing, playing house while burying the past. And really, who could ever love a child carrying the blood of gold? Then he demanded she tell Rick the truth. Rick stared at her, totally baffled, like he couldn't even process what he was seeing. Still can't figure out what any of it even means? But all she could say was, when he was born, he was so cute, I couldn't breathe. Did pinched his ear, trying to make sense of the nonsense she was blurting out. The men pinning Rick down suddenly broke into wild laughter when they saw him crying, and as they kept him trapped, D-Day stepped in, ready to throw a punch. But before Rick could even lift a finger, he slammed his Class 2 move. 2. The mighty creation surged with holy magic, and it punched the two men who were still gripping him down. The last one lunged at Rick with a knife, but Rick snapped out of the way and smashed his head in. The guys gripping his mother lunged to attack her, but Rick blew in with Class 2 windstorm creation and holy magic, then slammed them down hard before they could react. He just stood there, shaking, eyes wide, as Rick wiped out his men in the blink of an eye. So wasn't he only picked for the hero's party through connections? When Rick snapped his gaze on him, the guy stumbled back, dropped hard to the ground, and blurted, "Don't come any closer!" He insisted that murdering nobles is forbidden, praying that this rule would stop Rick cold from making his move. But wait, did he honestly forget? Rick's already been tossed out of the Newfield family, and when Maris heard that, her suspicions clicked into place like they'd been screaming all along. Rick choked out an apology he couldn't even fully say, but she just smiled and told him he had nothing to regret. He'd always be her son, no matter what. Rick grinned in agreement, then snatched up a rock, rocking and shattering it into chunks as he raged and threatened them. "So if you come for them again, your head's going to explode just like this." The pig was so terrified it just all spilled out. "All right, that's finished. Rick, Mary's, go." They bolted for the west gate together. At the exact same time, the carriage the girl Rick ran into in town came rolling in. The whole town was getting slammed by ruthless bandits. She gripped the horse's reins tight and took control. She held on to hope, praying like crazy that someone, anyone, would finally show up and rescue her. With the plan perfectly in motion, Rick got kicked out of the hero's party and the Newfield family. Then he and his mother slipped away from the Grandine Empire, and he charged toward his homeland, the commercial nation of Jilk. Rick slammed back onto the wagon right after he dropped that flying monster. Thomas, the coachman, looked genuinely impressed, like any adventurer who once rode with the hero would. And if he really did beat 10 Minotaurs in one go, maybe that wild tale isn't a lie after all. Mary's pressed, asking if it was really true, and Rick snapped back that it was, but even then, plenty of people still won't believe a word he says. Rick shot Thomas a big thank you for lending him a sword, while Mary's bowed her head, apologized fast, and begged Thomas to look after them until they finally reached the commercial nation of Jilk. All through the trip, Rick refused to sleep. He stayed on guard the whole time. It's way too calm, like monsters can't possibly be real, and it's lulling him to sleep. Maris caught him yawning and urged him to take a quick rest, but he snapped it off and refused. Compared to his trip with Heinz, it's nothing. He told her he was totally fine, because you never know what tomorrow's going to throw at you. And yeah, he just jinxed himself. He spotted bandits tearing through the forest like they owned the place. Thomas's nerves were on fire, but the fact that they hadn't spotted him yet gave him a tiny breath of relief. Still, what on earth were they hunting? Rick stared ahead and saw it. Straight up, another wagon they were hunting, and he knew those guards had already been wiped out. The horses are freaking out too. They're about to topple everything, and they might end up without their coachman at all. Thomas said, "No detours. Just cut straight through the highway. Zurley's only a little farther." Rick was right on the verge of saying yes. Then the girl crammed inside the wagon suddenly screamed for help, and he realized the nightmare was already sealed. He faced her choice and decided to save her. Then Thomas slammed the brakes, terrified the bandits would catch them any second. Even if he wanted to help, it's already too late. Still, Rick digs in his heels and refuses to quit, insisting on going because whoever's trapped inside is still breathing, calling for help. "Help!" Thomas snapped that he didn't know how he'd rescue them since he couldn't spare his wagon or horses, so he figured Rick would have to sprint over there. And with zero hesitation, he leapt off the wagon. And he tore down the forest trail at breakneck speed. Meanwhile, one bandit slammed into the wagon's trail, caught the girl, and trapped her in a dead end. He was seconds away from stabbing her with a knife. When Rick came charging in and slammed a kick into the bandit's face, the man dropped his weapon and crumpled on the spot. He crashed into the house, dove straight into the wagon, and demanded, "Are you okay?" "It's getting dangerous in that wagon right now." They had no choice. "Jump down, now!" Rick shot out his hand to help her. The second she grabbed it, he scooped her up and bolted, right before the wagon tipped over. She hardly thanked him, but then she spotted the remaining bandits closing in, and panic hit her, because at this rate, he was next to get killed. She's so sweet it hurts. She keeps worrying about everyone else before she even thinks of herself. Then, out of nowhere, 4 bandits swarm in like a strike of lightning. They flung themselves off their horses and surged forward to smash the 2 attackers. Right when the bandits finally closed in, Rick slammed out Class 2, Windshield Creation, holy magic blazing to stop them. As the bandits erupted into full-blown chaos, Rick seized the opening and tore them down, one by one. The girl spun around in pure shock and blurted out her gratitude, thanking him for saving her life. Then she stepped forward and said, "I'm Luna," rushing to apologize for the late introduction. Rick shot down the idea of being a hero as soon as she called him one, and begged her to drop the formalities and call him by his name. Wait, now that Luna's thinking about it, haven't they crossed paths somewhere before? Rick nodded along, but that wasn't what Luna was really getting at. She was convinced they'd crossed paths long before Dortland, and Rick could feel it too, because this didn't have the vibe of a first meeting. Yet he couldn't remember ever seeing her that far back. There was no way he could ever forget someone as adorable as her, so Luna glanced aside, cheeks burning, and shot him a grateful smile. Realizing what he just said, Rick whipped around, mortified. Wait, is he actually trying to riz her up right this second? Just then? The bandit he'd crushed back in the wagon earlier slammed in from behind and grabbed Luna. He's locked in, determined to finish the job exactly as they asked. Luna's struggling flashed in his eyes. Then Rick yanked his sword out and totally panicked. Panic surged through him as he hacked the bandit's head clean off, and only then, too late, did he finally realize what he'd done as the man died in front of him. Luna caught her breath and thanked Rick for saving her again. But then her smile vanished when he just stood there, shaking and mumbling that he'd killed someone, like he couldn't even hide it. He gasped, couldn't get air, and clutched his chest as he tried to process what he'd just done. So they attacked first, right? If he hadn't killed him, he'd be the one lying dead now. That's just how the world runs. But still, this was the first time he'd taken a man's life. Skin tore, flesh got carved, bones snapped with a sickening jolt. Warm blood splashed across the air, and the horror on his face right before his life cut out. It's jammed in Rick's head, and it's disgusting as hell. Right then, Luna dropped into a crouch before him and grabbed his hand. And demanding to know, was this the first time he'd ever killed someone? Rick slammed his palm to his face, because in this world, living means swiping, lying, using people, and even murdering like it's normal. But after killing just one guy, he's already breaking down. That's pathetic, right? Luna yanked his hand away and begged him not to. She refused to believe he was anything less than human. Of course not. Like he said, taking lives is just the norm in this world. But if someone can murder without even hesitating, she'd look at them with pure disgust. She refused to see the person who protected her as anything less than incredible. To her, he's her savior. Then Rick just somehow gets better. Class 2, the power of love? Yeah, right. And truth is, she had to be scared too, but she steadies him anyway. Luna is seriously unstoppable. He grabbed her hand, then yanked himself to his feet. He's fine now, thanks to her. And Luna just breathed out, relieved she could help. She tried to stand, but her legs shook, so Rick had to steady her, and she blushed as she apologized. She talked like she owned the world, but deep down, it was clear she was the fragile one. Then bam! One loud crash cut through everything, a wagon barreling straight at them. Thomas shot a panicked look at Rick and yelled, "You okay?" Relief crashed over Rick the moment he saw them safe and sound. Meanwhile, Luna scrambled to apologize and let Rick help her up. And Rick gave her a quick, world-weary glance. Then he dragged it all the way to the wagon, and somehow it still ended with everyone freaking out, because he's just that pathetic. But he couldn't stand seeing her struggle one more second, so he swept Luna into his arms and made her blush hard. For now, he'll haul her back to the wagon they rolled in on, and Luna, lost in her thoughts, keeps telling him to hold her just like this. But the moment she clocked what she'd just blurted out, she snapped into an apology and fixed it fast, because, oh no, if she says it like that, Rick is going to want to hold her like this forever. Rick shoved her into the wagon, and Thomas let out a huge breath because at least they were both finally safe. But Maris misread everything he did and swore he was bringing home a bride. Then the two of them blushed hard. And he immediately blurted out a quick explanation that it wasn't like that, because even Thomas was now teasing them. Turns out he really did catch Rick's kindness, and now he's out there, helping people like it's his new mission. Luna thanked him for listening, but Rick spun toward him, baffled, as he blasted healing magic onto Luna's coachman, Ananto. Maris could finally exhale. Ananto and the cargo were safe, and that meant everything to her. Luna turned to her and thanked her, saying her name like it was a promise. Maris insisted she could call her mother-in-law any time she wanted, and when she saw her son's flustered face, she just burst out laughing, because yeah, he was taking it way too seriously. Luna whipped around to thank Rick again, but the truth flipped. Rick was the one grateful, because her saying she wanted to head back to the carriage gave him the exact push he needed to sort out his feelings. Earlier, Rick dropped the bandit's body into the ground and buried it deep. Then, he drove his sword into the spot, using it like a stand-in for a grave, and it was his own way of finally sealing the whole thing for good. He shut his eyes and clasped his hands to pray, because protecting isn't a mistake, it's a promise, and he swore he'd never swing his sword again if it meant losing himself. Then they tore back, right where they started. They finally rolled up to the Jilt commercial nation in Zurich. Right at the gates, the guards yanked their carriage to a stop and demanded to inspect their cargo. But then, bam! They stared in shock as Luna sat inside, alive and well. The guard demanded what happened to her carriage, and Ananto immediately stepped in to say they'd been hit by bandits. All that matters is they're safe, and Luna just introduced Rick as the guy who helped them. The guard slapped his shoulder, then thanked him for rescuing the two. Rick blinked in shock. He was sure they'd totally screwed up. Oh yeah, those bandits. He threw magic into the air, and just like that, the bound bandits he'd captured popped up out of nowhere. Ananto smirked with swagger, bragging that Rick's magic was the real deal. Then the guard blinked, baffled that Ananto was the one soaking in the pride, since none of it was his power. Still, they caught the bandit problem, said they'd handle things here, and just like that, Ananto welcomed them once more to Zurich. As soon as the guard walked off, Rick grabbed Thomas's attention, thanked him for everything, and shot out an apology for the sword because he'd left it sitting on the bandit's grave. Thomas waved it off like it was no big deal, telling Rick he didn't have to stress over what was already done. Don't worry, he can always make more later, like it's the escort fee, no big expensive deal. And that's the plan. He's setting up shop in this city for the next couple months, raking in profit the whole way. But before he even started, he asked for permission. So he pulled up and asked if Zaji, the shop's representative, was there. The second Maris heard Zaji, she erupted with excitement like she just spotted someone she truly knew. Luna's face twisted darker as she explained. She told him her father, Zaji, had died last month. Thomas blinked in shock. Wasn't Zaji supposed to be younger than him? Or did some illness twist everything? Luna snapped her head side to side. Maybe it was a nasty accident. Maybe monsters did it. But either way, he never came back after his trip for shopping. Thomas leaned in and apologized for dragging that painful memory back, then closed his eyes and prayed that Zaji finds peace. But if Zaji isn't the one steering the city anymore, then the next representative election is where it'll finally all be decided. Turns out it's Wales running the whole show, and his trading company has been hogging Xerox products for itself. They look like a brand new commercial faction, and they're butting heads with Luna's Moondrop trading crew because that's the war they picked. She came all the way to Dortland to buy because she truly believed her business would run smoother once she ditched Zurich. She burst into the representative election, ready to kickstart the Moon's Drop Trading Company, and Rick was stunned when he heard why. Wait, was she older than she looks? He couldn't stop himself and blurted out her age. She was 15, just like him, same age, same heartbeat, and somehow people can still throw their hat in the ring for representative at that age. Thomas couldn't help but wonder if anyone else was out there. Then Luna cut in and said, "Nope, it's just Wales. And me." Then Thomas couldn't stop thinking about it. This is just my guess, but the bandits who attacked her might have been sent by the Wales Trading Company. With only 2 candidates in the ring, it practically begs the question, who would even notice if the other one vanished? And he didn't think that took much figuring out. Luna refused to wrap it up because she had nothing solid to prove it. Rick suddenly snapped back to what the bandit had said earlier. Those words hit hard because they weren't just random attacks. They were hunting her on someone else's orders. But now they can't pry a single scrap of info out of them. Ananto urged them to go talk to the people they'd just caught, and decided to swing by the guard's post. Thomas's gut screamed trouble, so he grabbed Rick by the silence and told him to keep quiet about what happened on that road. Luna has 0 power, but he's still all in with the Moondrop Trading Company, because if she gets into trouble, she can always count on Rick, and if there's a problem money can fix, they'll bring it straight to him. But if Rick can't pull it off, he'll step in and do it himself. All right, he's gone for good now, and Thomas gets hit with a heartfelt goodbye as everyone watches him leave. Then Luna leaned in and asked what the mom and son were going to do next. Turns out they're headed to Maris's house in her hometown, a food shop Karen runs. Luna snapped to it instantly. The name rang a bell because Karen had been helping the Moon's Drop Trading Company for years. He pitched it to the company and even offered to tag along for a bit because the Moon's Drop Trading crew was already headed to the shop. They rolled up to the Moon's Drop Trading Company to deliver Luna and get this drop-off right. Luna. Right then, Nina burst outside in a maid outfit, panicking over Luna like her life depended on it. But the moment she spotted Rick and Maris, she snapped out of it, steadied her breathing, and bowed right away. Then she shot back, asking if they were business clients, and it was Luna who stepped in, explaining who they were and admitting they'd helped on her shopping trip. Nina froze, bowed again with full formality, and thanked them for looking after Luna. They'll come later to thank everyone properly. Luna insisted on going right now, but Nina shut her down, saying she's tied up at the shop and also juggling the representative election. The mom and her son hurriedly told them, "Don't stress about thanking us, just come visit any time." And they kept marching on toward the shop. Just as Maris was moving, someone shouted her name and clamped a hand onto her shoulder. Maris clocked him instantly, naval uniform and all, and man, it had been way too long. Naval lit up the moment she walked in, 16 years since her marriage, and Maris smiled back, clocking his outfit. "Wait, isn't that the guard's uniform?" she asked, and Naval nodded like it was burned into his memory. He'd sworn he'd protect the city's safety, just like his dad did, and Naval never forgot that promise. Then his gaze snapped to Rick, and he demanded to know who the guy was. Mary snatched Rick's arm and introduced him like, "That's my son." Rick bowed low and greeted Naval like she'd just stepped out of his past, because she wasn't a stranger at all. She was his childhood friend. But Naval already seemed to clock him. He'd heard the whispers that this guy was crazy strong. So did he somehow know he was about to end up in the heroes' party? Mary beamed and waved her hand, bragging that her son was finally proving how strong he was. He'd wiped out every bandit alone. "Oh God," she blurted, and then, he shot her a look and told her to shut up. Didn't he just? Naval beamed with pride as soon as he heard what Rick had pulled off. Since they brought it up, the captain's calling. So next time they finally get a break, they should swap stories from the past and keep it cool. Then he waved them off, and the moment they were gone, Rick practically pleaded with Marys to just make the introduction normally. Because, that's exactly how parents are. As they kept moving, they stumbled on this insanely huge building that totally blew their minds. Maris spotted the place at once. It used to be a fruit shop, and they somehow still had everything they needed. It's wild. One minute you're digging through random odds and ends, and the next you're staring at food, weapons, armor, and even magical treasures, like someone rebuilt the whole old world's legendary warehouse right here. The Whales Trading Company owns it. Right on cue, whales burst into view by the shore, like the ocean just decided to put on a show. From the building's balcony, he launched into his speech for the upcoming election and introduced himself to the roaring crowd, claiming he's sprinting in as the representative just to meet their expectations head-on. Once Rick snapped his past life memories back into place, the hero's party threw him out, and the Newfield family cut ties, right on schedule. With his mother, he tore through the slums and fled straight into the Jilt commercial nation. On the road to Mary's hometown, he threw himself in and saved Luna, a merchant getting ripped apart by bandits. They finally made it safely into Zurich, and right away, the city's election clock started ticking, with 2 candidates ready to battle, Luna, the late representative's daughter, and the current man trying to keep his seat. Wales is the one they're staring at, because they're sure he ordered those bandits to wipe Luna out. Wales pushed through his speech, and everyone nodded, because monsters had been swarming outside the city, so the real worry wasn't survival anymore. It was whether they could even find safe, reliable food. Don't worry, fear not. Their Wales Trading Company has locked down the food production line in Zurich, and with the nearby cities working side by side, they'll keep everything running smoothly for everyone. Every safe, reliable product is right here in this shop, and he fully expects people to see it with their own eyes, because there's no way he's letting the Moonsdrop Trading Company beat him. Those earlier reps weren't weak at all. They had real pull, and they churned out solid products for everyone. But that doesn't mean she's entitled to a better life just because the daughter of the old representative got the seat. You can tell the moment you see the trashy products from the Moon's Drop Trading crew, because if they sell those, then eating their vegetables and meat is basically a gamble. At the Wales Trading Company, their stomach will hurt, but it won't happen there. 3 guys in the crowd burst into loud laughter, and Rick's eyes snapped to them. Wait, they're actors, right? Wales vowed to tune into their voices, take bold chances, and kick stagnant Zurich back into motion. So he demanded that they hand over their votes to him in the election just 2 days from now. After he tore through his speech, he marched back inside, and right behind him came a man with a low ponytail. Guard or assistant? Either way, that stare had trouble written all over it. Marys couldn't stop noticing how wild Wales was getting, and Rick instantly shot back, saying he hated this kind of talk, especially when Wales tries to tear his opponent down. Marys nods along, so they decide to go all in and back Luna even harder. Rick blurted out, totally lost. Wait, she's not just giving 1 vote, she's handing out like 100 billion votes! And then he frowned. Don't they know how elections even work? Neither of them's been here long, so I don't think they can vote. At last, they burst into Karen's food shop and then into Mary's home. And for Mary, this is the first time in 16 years. But for Rick, it's brand new. So he has to step up, greet everyone, and introduce himself right away. But for his grandpa and grandma, isn't he just the kid of the man who stole half their daughter's life, and the one they don't even want to see? Oh no, the nerves are creeping in. And if he's freaking out, his mom is probably freaking out too, right? Right? That's exactly what he figured. Then she just barrels in like she has zero fear, no hesitation at all. A woman who looked just as old as Maris was seconds away from greeting her like they were in the middle of a business exchange. But the moment she recognized who it was, everything in her shifted. She lunged in for a hug the second Maris walked through the door, welcoming her home. Because 16 years in the slums is a lifetime, and Maris must have suffered through something brutal. As she tore away from the hug, Maris announced Rick as her son. Rick dropped into a bow, totally stunned, because he had no idea his mother had a sister. Maris stared at him, completely baffled, while her sister grinned and popped in like, "I'm Karen!" Mary's burst into laughter and told her to quit the jokes, then hit Rick with the bombshell. She wasn't joking at all. It was her mom. And right after that, Karen popped back in and introduced herself again, this time as his grandmother. If she's Maris's mom, then she should be around 50, right? Nope, she's 51, and somehow she looks like she hasn't aged a day. Rick snapped into a quick bow to show respect, but Karen burst into laughter, loving every second of being seen as young. Just then, the door swung open, and Maris's father rushed in, pulling her into a tight hug. Regret crushed him from the inside, over and over. If he hadn't let those urgent matters hijack his life back then, if he hadn't slipped into that city and crossed paths with that man Gordo, he could have shielded her from all of this. But he couldn't shield her, not even after death, and the guilt tore him apart as he begged himself for forgiveness. He's been taking all of this pain nonstop for as long as it's been happening. For now, he's just relieved to see she's safe. Maris wiped her tears and swore it was her son Rick who protected her. And it was all because of him that she finally made it back. Rick dipped into a quick bow and introduced himself like he owned the moment, while his grandpa just stared around in pure shock. Yeah, that's terrifying. As his grandpa strode right up to him. Rick braced for the blow, but it never landed. Then his grandpa spun around and strode off like nothing happened. Maurice leaned in and asked, "Can we live together from now on?" And her father, Daigo, 58 years old, straight up told them, "Do whatever you want." Quick heads up, there's news. They're shutting down the shop for the day. Today, Rick braced himself for cold treatment, but getting zero enthusiasm still stings like a punch to the gut. But the two women totally knew it. Daigo's over the moon, like he's practically bursting into a private victory dance inside, even if he doesn't look it. And yeah, Grandpa's the ultimate oddball. Classic. Rick squinted, totally unconvinced, wondering if it was even true, and if he could really click with Daigo from here on out. Anyway, Karen marched them straight to their rooms. Meanwhile, Daigo, now finally alone, couldn't stop trembling, and the shock hit him so hard he still couldn't wrap his head around having a grandson. And now it's even crazier. They're done with all that drama, and they're living together for real. Nothing could have made him happier. He was absolutely over the moon. He shot his fist up and cheered, so happy he's alive. And even better, his grandson Rick looks just like him. A total, handsome man. No way. How arrogant to compare his own grandson to himself. Rick's got a rare kind of talent, so strong it can win over every woman in the world. Seeing his grandson's face every single day from here on out feels like pure heaven to him, like he's finally landed the life he dreamed of, with a bunch of fresh memories waiting for a truly happy old age. And if Rick's not just handsome, but also an exemplary son, his popularity would skyrocket even higher. No way, this can't be real. That sweet, adorable grandson could get seduced and straight up fooled. So yeah, his grandfather presses him to pick the perfect partner, but if they're talking about someone who matches Rick, he can't stop thinking about Luna from the Moon's Drop Trading Company, and next time he'll finally introduce her himself. So Rick falls head over heels for Luna, and the moment his "I introduced them" story hits, his reputation rockets straight to the top. A few hours later, everything changes. At last, Rick whipped up the beef stew he'd shared with Maris. Then they dug in before they left the slums behind. Karen stared in disbelief because that guy was whipping up mouth-watering meals with pure magic. Meanwhile, Maris tore through her food like she was racing the clock. Diego scoffed at them, acting like they were idiots for getting so hyped over a measly little bowl of broth. And it's clear he loved it too, because he's the first one done eating. Right then, when the day finally wrapped up, Rick sank his teeth into his mother and grandma, bid them good night, and slipped out under the cover of darkness. He leapt back, then whipped out his detection skill to pinpoint everything, and tailed the target he'd singled out, praying his instincts were totally off. In Jilt Commercial Nation, Zurich, while Arluna, backed by the Moon's Drop Trading Company, sprints for the new city representative seat, she also carries the weight of being the daughter of the former representative. And Wales, running the city like a total rookie for the Wales Trading Company. 2 days before their election showdown, Rick trailed Naval all day, secretly clocking every move just to satisfy his own curiosity, hoping he's just heading out for some routine patrol. It's totally empty, but he pushes deeper and deeper, like he can feel his real destination calling him in. But wait, he just slammed on the brakes out of nowhere. Is a guard shift changing? No way, that doesn't fit, and on top of that, Rick can't see worth a damn. So he pushed himself to the limit and fired up night vision. Because of that, he finally spotted the guy Naval met up with, the one who's been with Wales. And that's a problem. He can't hear anything from where he is. If he has to, he'll switch to enhanced hearing, 5 times sharper than a normal person, and Naval will apologize for all the noise, while the man with the low ponytail just keeps waiting. That settles it. They truly know each other. But why in the world was Naval hanging out with someone on Wales's side? He didn't have to wait long to get his answer. Noise clocked that Luna came back unscathed, and Naval shot back that it was Rick's fault they still ended up failing. So that's what it all meant. Now the whole thing finally clicks. While they talked through the day, Naval didn't just guess. Because Rick used to be in the hero's party, she knew it was him alone who wiped out the bandits. So was Naval actually his mother's friend, or not? Noise tore into Naval for stumbling on the job, even after they paid him well and even handed him soldiers, because you can't just shrug that off. Not when no one can predict election results, no matter how good the odds look. And even with Captain Neld overseeing the election, they still can't breathe easy. Rick pressed his ear to the wall, because a secret huddle between a candidate's people and election overseers is instant, total disqualification. Was this Wales's doing? Or is this chaos calling the shots all by itself? Noise made Naval swear, if we win, the guards' treatment will finally get better, way better than this. And even with those monsters climbing higher and higher, the truth still hit hard. Their lives were worth less than in any other town, right? He just couldn't picture Luna thinking that far ahead. Naval finally gets it. This is their master plan, and it's built to seal Wales's victory for good. Noise spun around, scoffed that he wouldn't expect much, then said he'd wait anyway. Just to be safe, they'll cook up their own plan to knock the Moondrop Trading Company down. Fully legal, no funny business. Rick's stomach dropped when he heard the plan to make Luna lose, because once it started, every guard in Wales's faction would mobilize. Noise snapped his hand and warned Naval to double-check everything, no screw-ups, for the next 2 days before they left. From what we've seen today, Rick can't even figure out who's really backing Wales. If he called them out, who would believe a brand new face that just stumbled into town? No one. Should he come clean to his family or spill it to Luna and her people? Nah, even if Luna snapped on them after hearing it, they'd just insist it was a scheme meant to sabotage Wales, and the whole thing would blow up in their faces. So now he has to dig up rock-solid proof to rip the mask off their fraud. But the election is coming in 2 days, so what in the world is he supposed to do? Right before he took off, Rick caught Naval muttering something about his mother, Maris, but the words blurred in the noise and he couldn't make them out, so he just left. The very next morning, Rick shot up from bed and blasted magic to scout the seas and track every hint of Noise. Naval's out on patrol, scanning for trouble, but while Noise plays Wales' bodyguard, The warehouse is cranking out a massive flow of supplies, and somehow there's no obvious sign of anything suspicious. Right then, someone slammed a knock on his door. Karen leaned in and asked him straight up whether he'd run into any trouble since he got here. Rick shot back that he didn't even have his own room, so he was thrilled, and with everyone around, he had absolutely nothing to complain about. Karen felt relief wash over her, but she still made it clear, if he was dealing with anything, he just needed to speak up. So Rick sat there, eyes narrowing, feeling like something was chewing at the back of his mind. Karen leaned in and urged him to blurt out exactly what was weighing on his heart. Rick couldn't stop wondering what kind of person Zaji, the Moon Trading Company's last representative, really was. And as soon as Karen slid into the seat beside him, she leaned in and said Zaji was the real deal, a genuinely good man who could spot true value and appraise the best. And he threw his support behind churches and orphans, pure virtue through and through. Rick figured if Zaji could appraise things so well, then he had to be sharp at business too. Sure enough, the guy was competent. But the way he handled people was unreal. People just gravitated toward him without even trying, and that's exactly who Zaji was. It's gotta mean the bond between Zaji and the townsfolk was seriously strong. Just as the talk heated up, Mary stormed in and told Rick he had a visitor waiting. Rick rose to head out, but right before he could slip the door open, Karen called after him, promising he could come talk to her again, about anything at all. And Rick grinned and nodded, then finally stepped outside, only to find Luna waiting there, here to deliver her thanks. Right after the election, she'll come back for a real visit, and Maris couldn't stop thanking her because even with all those deliveries keeping her slammed, she still showed up to help. Rick froze. Wait, was she really doing every delivery by herself? Yep, every single one, and she was determined to knock them all out today, no matter what. But if it comes to that, Rick will step in, lurking behind his Dago, keeping a close eye on the whole scene and ready to help her out. Still, he couldn't shake the question, when the hell did those two ever cross paths? Because his whole scheme to boost his reputation as their Cupid is toast. After he delivered every last drop of the goods. Kids, Luna shot Rick a huge thank you for jumping in, and because of him, she managed to deliver everything way faster. Then Rick waved it off like it was no big deal, and right after that, he realized every shop they hit were old, familiar faces. Yep, Zaji's father and she were basically comrades and family, and that's why she's determined to defend it all. So she's sprinting as the representative. Right then, a loud shout ripped through the air, and they sprinted over to find out what on earth was happening. Right there, waiting like a bad omen, were the three guys Rick had seen at Wales's speech. The mohawk, Gonza, and yeah, that ridiculous chest hair. Then the rumors hit hard. Bandits were going after Luna, and she was moments away from getting killed. Luna snapped back. I'm alive, can't you see that? Now tell me, what's this huge commotion you're stirring up? The shopkeeper, her father's friend, said those three picked a fight with his wares. But Gonza shot back that they hadn't done a thing wrong and were only there to judge the products honestly, like real customers. He grabbed a cucumber, called everyone over, then, right through the shopkeeper's protests, snapped it in two, insisting it was shriveled and hollow, like no one in their right mind would pay for that. And sure enough, they started mocking the Mood Drop Trading Company, sneering, "Aren't you ashamed to sell something like this?" Bystanders poked the vegetables, recoiled, and agreed it was downright awful. If it was dirt cheap, they might grab it to survive, but at full market price, no way they'd touch it. Rick spun toward them, stunned, because the customers were getting nudged into labeling it wrong. Luna tried to explain it, saying the Wales Trading Company snapped up every vegetable around Zurich, so they were stuck with only the scraps, and Gonza just looked at her like, what kind of thing is that to say? Buying in bulk just cuts the price, so they can undercut customers and still make a profit. Exactly what any merchant would do, right? So it's not breaking the law, is it? By twisting her words, he tanks the Moon's Drop Trading Company's reputation. The customer, fresh off their first trip to Zurich today, was ready to ditch the Moon's Drop Trading Company and go straight to the Wales Trading Company instead, because they swore it looked way better. Rick couldn't help but wonder if those feelings were actually real, or just paid shill work, because they sure looked that way now. Gonza slung an arm over the shopkeeper's shoulders and snapped that at this rate his business was finished, then ordered him to ditch the Moon's Drop Trading Company and throw his lot in with Wales's instead. He swore that if he went along, they'd load him up with fresher veggies and he'd cash in bigger. And the shopkeeper shook like a leaf, insisting he still owed a debt to the late head of the Moon's Drop Trading Company. Gonaz whispered right in my ear like a devil, and I understood. His debt guy is gone, isn't he? So it doesn't matter anymore. The outcome was obvious, but he'll still be waiting for his answer the next time. And then, just like that, they vanished. The shopkeeper snapped an apology. He couldn't just turn them down outright, but Luna got exactly why he had to hesitate. Turns out it was her who owed him an apology for forcing him to sell those lousy vegetables. Rick couldn't stand seeing Luna hurt, so he snapped into action and raced to figure out what he could do. In Bobbywed, he shouted for the shopkeeper's attention, begging them to carry the Dordland goods Luna risked her life to bring back. The shopkeeper didn't hesitate. He agreed on the spot, and he made it clear he wanted in on the action too. Luna handed him a few jars of salt from Dordland and begged him to sell them for 10 silver coins. Then the shopkeeper shut that dream down. Because the Whales Trading Company is hawking the exact same stuff, just charging a whopping 8 silver coins. Only 27 hours are left before the election finally shuts its doors. In this world, even bland salt gets treated like it's pure treasure, while one measly silver coin matches 10,000 yen. And yeah, the gap between 10 coins and 8 isn't just math, it's a life or death kind of difference. So if the origin and the quality match, you'd go straight for the cheaper option without thinking twice. So this is what he meant. We'll devise a strategy to take down the Moon's Drop Trading Company. Rick got played, and that's exactly what this whole thing was really about. They figured out Luna was hauling salt from that same region, so Whales snapped up a huge stockpile and flooded the market with cheaper salt, right when the Moon's Drop Trading Company hit the same moment. Then Luna's salt can't be sold at all. Luna hurried back to the shopkeeper she'd handed the salts to and apologized, because she never expected the Whale Trading Company to snag a stash this massive. On the shopkeeper's side, they want to back her in the election and help her run the business, yet now they've got to swallow their pride and apologize. They're in debt to her predecessor, and they genuinely meant to support her. But the moment a monster company locks onto them, they're left with nothing. They're completely powerless. Rick couldn't shake the thought. Are they scared of the Whales Trading Company? Nah, they're merchants. And when you crunch the numbers, swapping Moon's drop trading business for Whales is the smartest, money-wise move. Luna Bode stood there, thanking everyone for backing the Moon's Drop Trading Company ever since its old boss. Then the crowd exploded into chaos, demanding to know if she was about to shut it all down, because at this pace, they were sure the company would drown in debt. A quick tally says there are about 300 jars of salt, worth 3,000 silver coins, and somehow that means a crushing 30 million yen worth of debt. The shopkeeper shot her a worried look and demanded what she planned to do next. Luna flashed a confident smile and told them not to stress. She had connections, so everything was fine. Even Rick fully bought it. And he told her not to hold back. If she needed anything at all, she should ask. No delays. As soon as they vanish, Rick spots Luna's hands shaking uncontrollably, and the tears she'd been fighting back finally spilled down her cheeks. With worry clawing at his chest, he cradled her in his arms, because the truth hit him hard. Luna's the one paying the price, and she's faking those connections just to keep everyone else from panicking. Rick demanded to know why she was crying, and Luna snapped that it was nothing. He gets it. He understands. So why won't she ever turn to him? Is she really about to shoulder all of this alone? Luna's trying to do everything by herself, and it's not going to work. If this ever happens again, she'll be stuck carrying it all by herself. So he pushes her to speak up, reach out, and ask for help. Because this time, he won't be the one doing it for her. Rick blurted that he couldn't believe she was leading a trading company, and they were the same age. Luna swallowed hard and said, "My dad's gone, my mom's sick, and I'm the only one left to take the reins." Rick clenched her even tighter, so if she could have passed it off to someone else, why didn't she? She didn't, which means she's not just pretending. She really, truly loves the Moon's Drop Trading Company. And she means it. Like her father, she longed to roll in useful tools and pack in mouth-watering food, then watch the townspeople's faces light up, because building a company like that was her dream. Because it's precious to her, she can't afford to lose sight of what really matters, or what has to be done, period. Rick only wished he'd gotten the chance to meet her father and ask what kind of man he really was. Zaji was a soft-hearted father, but the moment business was on the table, strictness snapped into place. He drilled it into Luna that before she ever sold a single item, she had to master proper manners, respect every customer, and treat the people she worked side by side with. At the end of the day, this whole business world runs on three things: the customers, the producers, and the merchants like them, people who link it all together. Rick said he got it. Her father's real lesson was simple. Think about the customers, don't charge in solo, and team up with everyone. That's the message, right? Together, not alone. He's never had anyone like her in his whole life. She's different, and it burns that she's got all these people around her in this town. Once Luna heard his words, it hit her hard. She never truly understood a thing her father tried to say. Rick leaned in and demanded what she planned to do next, because it might already be too late, and that thought still hung in the air. Still, she's determined to lower her head to everyone and ask, is there another way we can face this together? Because she's not stopping until they find a real solution. She finally decided she wouldn't face this alone. She'd lean on her friends, and you can bet Rick will jump in to help too. Luna couldn't shake the worry. What if it wasn't really okay? Since he could be her friend, even if he wasn't with the trading company. Then Rick pressed a finger to her lips and silenced her. He's convinced that's the perfect excuse to step in and offer his help. Luna looked away, cheeks blazing. But before she could hold back, she realized he'd already done enough for her. Yet he brushed her aside and pressed her to tell him the truth. No sugarcoating. Truth is, she's trying to protect the trading company her dad built with his own hands. And she's begging him to lend her his strength because of course he's going to do it. The Whales Trading Company slipped into shady schemes every step of the way, and he's going to make them regret it because now he finally clocks their exact positions and realizes just how close she is. He yanked her into a tight embrace without thinking. Now that he's fully aware, how on earth did he ever talk to her before? Luna and the others awkwardly looked away from each other because Luna was itching to step forward and ask everyone for help right before all of this happened. But there's one thing Rick wants to handle first, if she's cool with it. Rick told her to keep quiet and not tell a single soul what he was about to do, and at first, Luna just stared, until her face flushed with what she thought he might pull. Then she nodded fast, agreed to stay silent no matter what he did, and even swore on her life. So what on earth did Luna think Rick was about to do? Then he snapped his attention to the jars of salt and unleashed his sacred Genesis magic, because Eldorado's salt turns bitter from a heavy hit of magnesium chloride, meaning this whole world has been munching on Nagari all along. Then he'll imagine seawater being hauled into the salt field. Then they were hauled into the open, dried by the blazing sun and biting wind, using the old-school sun-dried salt method. So it churns out mineral-rich, mouth-watering salt. Luna demanded to know what he was doing, but he dodged the question and shoved the salt in her hands. Taste it. She followed his command instantly, like there was no room for doubt. And she nearly choked from how insanely delicious it was. No bitterness at all, like salt had turned into pure perfection, and she'd never tasted anything this good before. Rick grinned and told her to try another. This time, a fresh cucumber dusted with the same salty seasoning from before. Luna took a bite and instantly lit up because it was insanely good. She'd never tasted anything that delicious in her whole life. Yeah, it's a total win, straight up. Rick didn't want to just shout, "New salt!" out of nowhere. He figured if he let people taste it first, they'd actually want to buy it. And Luna was all in. It wasn't only the magic that transforms the salt. It was the plan to serve food made with it before they try selling a brand new product with zero history. Sure, he only copied the method from the last world, but here, that copy hits like a brand new revolution. All right, that's all that's left. She needs to enchant the last few jars, Luna sighed. then shoved the whole mess onto him, and yeah, she didn't really help at all. Rick snapped that it wasn't true. This time they already had the base materials, so it barely cost any mana, and it didn't drain him for days like it would have without them. Luna let out a breath of relief, because she was so happy she could actually help. Rick clenched his fist, driving home that Luna was the only one who could sell it. And it worked, because she promised she'd do her best. Just as they were about to soak in the moment, Thomas burst in for an unexpected visit because he figured Luna needed to know the news he'd stumbled onto beyond the city walls. Company. A farmer who dealt with the Whales Trading Company warned him that they showed up with some nasty helpers for the price talks, bullied the moment, and basically cornered him into selling at a jaw-dropping low rate. It was straight-up disgraceful. What were they thinking, treating the producers like that, knowing full well the customers would still snatch the cheaper option? For any merchant who actually understands what's happening, running business like that is a straight-up no-go, and Luna feels the same way, like she's actively rejecting her father's Moon's Drop Trading Company principles. She thanked Thomas for the intel, and yeah, it wasn't the kind of talk that swings votes, but it lit a fire under her and made her more determined than ever. Then it hit her. She just cooked up an absolutely brilliant idea. At Karen's food shop, they threw a free tasting and served up freshly cooked salt-sautéed vegetables to everyone. Customers took one bite and their faces lit up. Those sautéed veggies were sweet as candy, and the salt hit different, like it belonged in its own league. And now everyone's singing its praises. Who could have guessed you'd sell something like this so perfectly? Luna swore the new salt came from Rick's idea, and then dropped the real reason. Those veggies their farmers grew aren't getting wasted. Only 24 hours are left before this election finally ends. All right, this is where the counterattack kicks off. They've got to push back through the shops and hit another round. The Whales Trading Company tried to crush the Moon's Drop Trading Company by undercutting them with the exact same goods, so they fought back by producing top-grade salt through sheer creation and then hit back with the same cut-the-market move from Rick's old life, challenging them head-on. He and Luna hit the shops again, pushing for test sales of the new salt. Everything seemed to be rolling perfectly, or at least that's what he told himself. Marys shouted to Luna that things had gone badly, and Luna and Rick tore over immediately, demanding to know what happened. Maris beamed with pure joy. Those reviews were so crazy good that the salt vanished the second it hit the shelves, and the shopkeepers practically gathered on the spot, grinning as they announced they'd sold out in their own shops just as fast. Luna's eyes flooded with tears of pure joy. If it catches on inside those cells, all their debts can finally be wiped clean, and they might even seize it as the perfect shot to campaign in the election. Right then, those three idiots barreled in, demanding what all the noise was about. So did they really lose their minds just because they couldn't score decent goods anymore? They harassed the greengrocer yesterday, and now they're back at it, Luna pressed them, asking what they wanted, while Gonza figured Luna was already thinking about throwing in the towel on tomorrow's election. Luna told him not to worry, but Gonza just threw back a laugh like she was pretending to be brave, because he was dead certain the product they were risking on would never sell. So she's drowning in debt with a pile of unsold stock, right? Then why doesn't she quit the election, drop her salt in the laps of the Whales Trading Company, and demand one deal in return: Turton servant status to the Whales? The two right behind him burst into laughter. Exactly the kind of mischief their brother Gonza always pulled. Shopkeepers snapped. "What nonsense are you even talking?" Then marched over to ask Luna if she had any stock left, because their salt was gone for good, and another one backed it up too. It wasn't everyone else failing to sell, it was them under the Whales Trading Company banner. Gonza scoffed, calling them idiots. Of course customers would switch to them if they were cheaper by 2 silver coins. So what? Were these buyers too dumb to even count their own money? So yeah, just like Rick predicted, they're blaming customers for their own screw-ups, and honestly, these guys are straight up useless. Meanwhile, Luna couldn't believe her ears. Did they really just say that to the customers? Were those people actually members of the Merchants Guild? Gonza let out a sly snicker, because the truth is, the Whales Trading Company is what lets customers score cheap deals. Without Whales, they'd be stuck paying crazy prices, like overpriced salt, for example. And Luna couldn't shake the question of whether charging high prices for solid quality stuff was really the same as doing something wrong. The choice is totally up to the customers, and she swears their salt tastes better than anyone's. Gonza just scoffed. You're really saying that, even though it's from the same place? That's hilarious. Then she leaned in and dared them to taste her moondrop salt. Luna granted his request, dumped salt onto his palm, and had Gonza inspect it. These grains are perfect, but can that alone really change the flavor? Then he tasted it with a quick lick, and his face lit up because it was insanely delicious. So now he's staring at us like we're the ones who caused it. Anyway, the other two tasted the salt, and it barely even stung. Compared to that, Dordland salt is straight-up garbage. Rick smirked, and the flavor yanked every last real feeling right out of them. They honestly didn't expect it to taste this damn amazing. So where on earth did this come from? Gonza balled his fist, grabbed a block, and growled that if this salt had never existed in the first place, none of this would have happened. Luna threw her body in front of the wagon packed with salt jars, but Gonza wouldn't back off. Fine, she can die with the salt, he snarled, and Rick wouldn't let that happen, not for a second. He blasted Class 2, Windshield Creation Holy Magic, just to stop himself from hurling the block. Gonza's two lackeys sneered, saying magical barriers were pointless. Nobody could outmatch their brother's raw power. Rick then fired off his appraisal skill on Gonza, and you could tell his strength stat was off the charts. To make it worse, Gonza was also powering up with a strength enhancement skill. He snapped, "Why now?" Because this was straight up dangerous. Yet Gonza insisted their master, Whales, had even handed them a role to play. So they're going to wipe out anything blocking the whale trade, salt included. And yeah, that brat Luna too. Crime or not, he doesn't care. He'll kill whoever he wants and do it his way. He's slaughtered countless people, and somehow he still struts through the city like nothing can touch him, because Whales is shielding him. The crowd traded nervous looks, whispering to each other, "Is this really true?" Rick feared that if folks watched thugs like these roam free, they'd swear Whales was teaming up with the soldiers, and no one could possibly let Whales win. Rick fought to hold his ground as Gonza slammed into his barrier over and over, and it was obvious he wasn't holding up for long. Gonza flashed a cruel smirk, promising that stepping up to him would be the biggest mistake of his life, and now he's lining him up for a brutal end. Rick snapped his head to Luna and told her to run while she still could, but Luna wouldn't budge. If he gets hurt, it's on her, so she can't ditch him and bolt. Does she really think she's supposed to die right there with him? And then, what's he even supposed to do? His strength stat doesn't even come close to Gonza's. Even with every skill rank stacked, he still can't overpower him in a straight-up strength showdown. So if it's come to this, he'll march straight at him and unleash sacred magic backed by sheer, overwhelming power. Because yeah, times before, magic-fueled guys have beaten Gonza. But still, he's never lost a single time when it's all about raw strength, which is why he's way above those clueless baggage shuttlers from a hero's party. Two of the minions sneered at Rick for failing to guard a woman without magic, but to me, they just sound like a pair of blabbering bananas. Sure, magic would have ended the fight in a blink, but since this idiot keeps pushing, fine. In a showdown of pure strength, Rick's going to crush him and choke his pride out of the moment, because when Gonza tried to shove him away using nothing but muscle, Rick locked onto Gonza's hands and refused to let go. No magic needed. The two minions snorted at him. What a moron. Trying to stop it with bare hands? Gonza snickered, ready to crush Rick with brute muscle power. Muscles bulged. Rick fought back, and no matter how insanely strong Gonza's muscles are, he still won't drop. Rick will keep battling even with those fragile muscles. Trying to harass the greengrocer, sabotaging the salt he poured his magic into, and, most unforgivably, going after Luna? No way. I'll crush this musclehead's pride and make him choke on defeat. First, he'll light up Creation Holy Magic and forge Skill Enhancement A. Then he'll drive his already massive strength even higher, casting Grade 4 Creation Genesis and unleashing holy magic so powerful his power level spikes out of nowhere. He pushed back, hard, forcing Gonza away. Gonza's arms shook as the truth hit him. Rick didn't just use the technique. He made the skill stronger itself. And that was supposed to be impossible. Rick clenched his fists, and you can feel the confidence radiating off him. Proud of his strength, aren't you? Damn it, he's about to get crushed in this fight for strength. No doubt about it. Gonza can't even process it. How the heck are those skinny arms overpowering his muscles? Rick charged forward and shoved Gonza back. So that means his strength really is bigger than his boast, huh? Those mighty muscles look pathetic now, and if he thinks he can endanger Luna, he's about to pay. Rick clenched his fist and lifted it high, and drove a brutal punch into Gonza's stomach. He hit the ground face first, out cold. His two minions hauled him back, stunned that he'd been beaten by some brat. They swore they'd report it to Wales and make Rick pay, but the crowd erupted, laughing. "Serves you right! Don't you dare come back!" Luna blurted out an apology for bugging Rick again, but he waved it off, saying none of it was true. He straight up said her being there brought out his real strength, like, that's the power of love, y'all. All of them, snuggling up and going full lovey-dovey. The shopkeepers burst out with envy and started teasing them, so hard that the two instantly blushed from pure embarrassment. At the Wales Trading Company, Wales scolded Gonza. He apologized and swore he only lost because Rick's power suddenly spiked. But that wasn't what Wales was furious about. He'd heard Gonza was out there, spreading rumors that he went on a rampage through the city and killed people. Gonza froze and blurted that he only wanted to show everyone Wales's power, but Wales snapped and slammed his fist into his chair's armrest. What a clown. He picked a fight he didn't need. Who in their right mind votes for a trading company that straight up claims it murdered people? Off to the side, Noise went quiet in deep thought. Then, out of nowhere, the Moonsdrop Trading Company rolled out a fresh kind of salt that afternoon. Where did they even pull something like that from? Wales seethed with frustration. Then it hit him. Tomorrow's election was coming too, and the worst part was realizing two totally unexpected disasters were crashing in at once. Noise told him the investigation was in, and that both Wales and Luna's approval ratings were tied right down the middle, so frustration hit him even harder. But the noise kept him convinced bad info about them wouldn't crawl through the whole city, not with time running out, especially since Moonsdrop only has one weapon: salt. With everything the Wales Trading Company has delivered, and all the help it's poured into the townspeople, their wins dwarf what the opposition has managed, and it's wild to think they've somehow ended up fully stuck in the dirt, trailing hard. Wales blasted. All I want is one thing: guaranteed victory. Noise reassured him that Naval had already locked in the vote and promised there's a plan to guarantee his absolute win. Wales leaned in and demanded, "So what kind of planet is it?" So Noise had finally cracked, and once Wales heard all of it, a sly smirk spread across his face. Because, yeah, this plan was absolutely solid. But what if one wild, unlikely twist costs him everything? Noise flashes him a reassuring smile, because he's already planned for that exact worst-case scenario. Stuff like this happens non-stop in the world. Random disasters, no warning, just accidents that nobody sees coming. At last, Election Day finally crashed into the world. Rick was so torn up that they wished they could have voted too, but hey, it was what it was. Karen and Daigo voted Luna in instead, and Daigo couldn't help but feel grateful. Thomas was right there with them too. And get this, Zurich's voter turnout blasts past 90%, so this election isn't just important, it's the one everyone's glued to. Karen told Rick the ballots get gathered and counted inside that building where the guards are posted, and it smells way too fishy, so he's going to slip in and check. He unleashed his detection skill and stared straight through the building like he could see every secret inside. He spotted someone posted by the ballot box, and the election supervisor vibe was all over them, Noise and Naval tagging along too. So what are they really cooking up? That's when it hit him. Two ballot boxes stood there, right in front of him. Could it be? He fired off his detection skill and peered right into that box. And yep, he was right. That's exactly what they were doing. What a cliché way to cheat. He snapped back the second Mary tapped his shoulder and pointed straight at Luna, who's now standing on the platform beside Wales. Wales squared up against her, bragging that all Luna would ever see is her own downfall and that she should have handed him the candidacy from the very start. Luna didn't back down for a second. She swore she won't lose because her allies are stronger than his threats. Then she fired back with total confidence. She'll crush him and forge a city where everyone finally gets to live in peace. Wales snickered. So spirited. She better say that only after she's the representative, because with him around, that future never happens. Luna bravely squared up to him, swearing she'll throw those exact words right back in his face. Sparks crackled between them, so loud even Thomas and Rick couldn't miss it. Even calm Luna can't stand how the whale trading companies do business in this world. No, not in this city at least. Here, the system isn't as tightly controlled as it is in Japan, so the powerful just do whatever they want. If they want clean politics, Luna has to win. No excuses, no second chances. Rick just prays the citizens won't chase quick, short-term fantasies and will vote for what helps them down the line. But here's the real bombshell. What happens next? Right as his mind drifted, someone nearby burst out, "Captain Neld is coming!" And suddenly it clicked. He's Naval's father, the man trusted to oversee the election. Neld knows everyone's chomping at the bit for the results, but he shuts it down. Stay here and wait, because the counting is about to start. This is a disaster. Wales has no idea who's really under his control here. But if they tally the votes in that sealed room, Luna's finished, so they have to stop it. No excuses, no matter what. Rick shot his hand up and yelled, "Let's count them right here!" So everyone would spot the results fast and freak out with him. Then Wales and Neld instantly panicked, telling him to stop acting ridiculous because the counting is happening in the back room, just like always. So everyone should stay put, and those outsiders who don't even know this city have no business talking. Rick couldn't shake the question of why they couldn't count the ballots here. For example, by making cheating impossible, Wales snapped in fury, grilling what kind of baseless lie this even was. Baseless, huh? Yeah, right. Rick's got proof, and he's going to force them to crack in front of everyone. The whole crowd bought into Rick's idea, and even that idiot Gonza was pushing the whales to flex, right before their eyes, showing off his victory. Luna doesn't hesitate either, and Rick flashes a smug grin. So tell me, in a moment like this, what would Wales even do? Wales ground his teeth with pure rage. He shouted that he'd never heard of counting ballots that way, then argued that counting has always happened in the back room of the polling station, so there's no reason to change a thing. Wait, did he really just say, always? Rick has no clue how long Wales has even been in Zurich, but that smells like a fraud scheme, and it's nothing like what he swore yesterday. If he remembers it right, he swears he'll tune in to every voice, test brand new ideas, and kick Zurich out of its stale, stuck routine. The people demand the votes get counted here, so instead of clinging to old ways, he needs to keep his campaign promise. Because isn't this the moment to try something new? Wales snapped that he had no right for some outsider like him to talk, then barked at Neld to haul the ballot box to the back room and start counting at once. Neld obeyed in a heartbeat. The crowd started whispering like, wait, is he really hiding something? Then the noise hit, and someone basically told him, just go with the flow. This ballot box is getting used no matter what. For the citizens, there's only one ballot box, so he walks in with total confidence because he's sure he's walking out the new representative. Wales smirked, then cleared his throat like he was about to lay down the next move. Wrote it all down, then granted their request. Rick nailed him exactly when he said he would. Wales snapped at Neld to grab the box right then. Sure, he figured those reforms could wait until he was officially elected, but man, did he cling too hard to Zurich's old ways. They had to seal victory right here, in front of everyone, so Neld fidgeted like crazy and finally pulled out the box. Wales thinks the fight's over, but Rick won't let it slide. He whips out Class 2 whirlwind creation magic. Logic backfired. Neld stumbled, and the box flew off the platform. They snatched up the dropped ballots, and the moment they saw only Wales's name staring back at them, they knew something was seriously wrong. Ballots rained down again, thumping onto the ground one after another. They cracked it open, and everyone blurts, "Whales!" Then a guy yells, "So where's the slip with Luna's name on it?" Silence hits hard. Even the crickets stop. So what, the ballot box is nothing but votes for whales? Bingo! One of the guards hauled out the real ballot box, and the citizens exploded into protest. Did he really think he could worm his way into becoming Zurich's representative with that kind of filthy trick? Wales went straight for the blame and tried to pin it on Neld, but Neld insisted it wasn't true. Meanwhile, Wales knew exactly what he was doing, stuffing pre-marked ballots into the box, and his own son Naval called him out on it, didn't he? Maris burst out in stunned confusion, whipping her head toward the Navy. Even now, Wales kept swearing he knew nothing and insisted he'd never once linked himself to those people. But the citizens didn't buy a single word of his nonsense. So he blurted a shout into the chaos, trying to cut through the noise, who rained down smoke bombs to hide them fleeing. Isn't Noise too skilled? Rick was starting to question who he really was. The guards swept the area fast and then closed in on Neld. They screamed they had no choice and that they were being dragged into it. Then he snapped around to Naval, panicking that his treatment won't get better if this keeps going, only for Naval to shake his head and say he didn't care about any of it anymore. He spun toward Mary's, insisting he never forgot the huge cause he swore to back then, and that it was meant to stay remembered. They need to pay for what they did, now. And just like that, boom, they got arrested. And this time, they're holding the real count right out in the open for everyone to see. So with the vote settled fairly, Zurich finally gets its new representative. The turnout hit 92.8%, and the final tally screamed 2,128 to 2,512. Luna won the election, and now she's officially the city's representative, ready to take her place. She crushed Wales, then sprinted straight into Rick's arms, screaming with joy that they just won the election. She practically glowed with gratitude because, yeah, it was all him, and he's the reason she could pull this off. But Rick cut her off fast, saying he only helped a bit, since he truly believes someone as wonderful as her should be the one to represent. Ever since she met him, he's been nothing but help at every turn, like he can't stop showing up for her, and she can't stop being grateful either. In the back, an auntie beamed while watching Luna and her boyfriend, and it was enough to make Rick's cheeks burn. She knows Luna's thrilled to be picked as the representative, but she urges them to hold back and save the rest for when they're finally alone together. Men glare daggers at Rick. Just like that, the two yank their hands off each other, and Luna bolts for her home, blabbering that it's her mother. But just as she tried to bolt, they stopped her and made her finish the election formalities, so the election was sealed and over. At the Wales Trading Company, Wales erupted in curses, furious that not a single one of them came through for him. Then he leaned in and demanded Noise confirm the prep was ready. He even slipped him extra money up front, so nobody better dare to mess this up. That little brat Rick? He just wiped out the disguised bandits and the guards. Now he's coming to finish him and Luna off together, for real. First, he'll smash the Moon's drop trading company to pieces. Then he'll plunge them straight into crushing despair. Noise smirked like he knew exactly what was coming, as Wales raged and rampaged all around him. That man Wales is completely unhinged. He's clutching a magic tool, cackling like a lunatic, because if he even uses it, the Moon's Drop Trading Company will burst into flames in an instant. No, sure, the whole area could turn into a burned-out wasteland, but that's none of his problem. The Noise just died behind him, and if he sticks with this lunatic, he'll get wrecked right alongside them. But that's totally fine. With this man, you don't get a second to be bored. Peace and order aren't what he's chasing. Wales storms in to grab Luna and lock her away as his personal toy. He'll torment her for as long as he can, then once she's outlived her usefulness, he'll just toss her aside. That's the only shot at forgiveness, Noise said, and this man is completely out of his mind. All right, fine. He'll roll with this madness. He just has to keep him entertained, because if he gets bored, it's over. So if he does, he's ending him. No mercy. The other world, El Dorado. Once Rick snapped back to memories from before he was reincarnated, rage boiled over. He was sick of the hero's party treating him like trash and fed up with his own family home, so he started acting out just to get them to kick him out. He and his mother tore out of the Grandine Empire's slums and sprinted toward the Jilk commercial nation, straight to her family. Then he whipped around and saved Luna, a merchant getting jumped by bandits, and together they finally rolled into Zurich, safe and sound. While the representative was gone, Kirk of Wales kept the city running, and then he threw every obstacle he could at Luna and the Moon's drop trading company. Rick's Genesis Holy Magic shut down every single rival for representative. No one could get past him. And on election day, just like they planned, they ripped the mask off Wales's fraud. Then Luna, the former representative's daughter, marched right into victory and got elected in style. Rick wasted no time again congratulating Luna, and she lit up, thanking him right on the spot. She asked if he'd been waiting for her, and he admitted, yeah, because they still hadn't caught any whales. She bowed deep, apologizing for the trouble, but Rick waved it off, said she hadn't done a thing wrong. He was just acting on his own. Luna stared out at the empty water, wondering where the whales had vanished. Rick had no clue either, but there was one possible answer. Learning he plans to get revenge on both of them, Luna's face twisted with raw terror. No wonder she's gone pale. On her trip from Dordland back to Zurich, she was nearly killed, and with the whales just out of sight, nobody knows when his gang will hit again, so he's freaking out after leaving Luna at the Moon's drop trading company. But the only thing he can do for her is stand in front of danger and protect her. He asked if she could crash at his place tonight, and it hit her like a lightning bolt, leaving her completely stunned. Death. She went red instantly, thoughts spinning out of control, while Rick, clueless as ever, had absolutely no clue what was racing through her mind. He figured it was the only way, keeping them together, because if she went off on her own, danger would hunt her down. Luna kept twisting her fingers, insisting she's not against it. She just said they barely met, so it feels way too fast. Rick clamped his hands on her shoulders, reading her fear that she'd rather stop causing trouble, and he snapped, "This is life or death, so yeah, I'm going to be a little forceful, because I won't let them hurt you again." Then he swore, loud and unshakable, "I'll protect Luna." He pushed the point hard. He wanted her to come with him, yet he wouldn't say a word about it. Luna swallowed hard, then finally nodded along, like she couldn't hold back the truth anymore. She'll tag along with him, but she's praying he'll slow down so she can cleanse her body. Rick was seconds from agreeing when it hit him. Even with a detection skill keeping watch, they still don't know when Wales's men are going to strike. So he likes it if she shows up exactly as she is. But no, she can't swallow that. Not when today's election has her wrecked with nerves, all sweaty and shaky. Rick totally gets how she feels, but first, they've got to get her to his place. Luna's cheeks burned as she imagined Rick as the kind of guy who doesn't hold back. The townsfolk just picked a brand new representative, and the whole town feels like it's tipping into a new chapter, while Rick is desperate to talk her over. He's got a favor he needs to ask her, like right now. Luna blurted, shocked, "You want to use appraisal on her?" And Rick quickly explained that he just needed to know her abilities, just in case. But if she says no, he'll shut the door and walk away. Luna figured it was fine because he'd learn everything on the bed later anyway. So seriously, Io, do 15-year-olds really have a better love life than the dude watching this? Rick couldn't catch what she said, so he snapped and hit her with appraisal right away. He froze when her status window popped open, and everything stayed normal until that closet perv title hit. And suddenly, what the hell was that? Should he spill this to her? Or keep it locked inside? Luna caught him standing there, completely stunned, and her mind lit up like maybe she just found an amazing power. Those sparkling eyes gave it away, didn't they? Now what was she supposed to do? Maybe he'd just misread her, right? Right? He had to have misread it. He had to. Do skills just randomly glitch out or what? He can't even picture serious Luna turning into some kind of perv. So he shot back an apology and begged for one more shot to use appraisal. Luna nodded instantly, no second thoughts at all. If he hadn't messed it up earlier, then he could just be honest with her, right? It turns out that closet perv title for her? Yeah, it's not just talk. Like, the more Demeter girl stares, the dirtier her thoughts get. And man, He could have said that and played it off anyway, so he hits the appraisal again. And yep, it's still blasting, loud and crystal clear. So tell me, how's he even supposed to get the words to her? But the moment he thinks it through, Luna, this sweet, demure beauty, has secret, dirty fantasies she tries to hide. No way! This is the perfect turning point. He might finally start seeing her in a whole new light. And look at them, don't they just click? He nearly blurted out in shock when Luna suddenly demanded he tell her status already. Right now, her level's at 8 out of 100, so she's got tons of room to keep leveling up. And that mysterious title with question marks? It's hiding something, and once the right condition hits, it's going to reveal itself. He asked if she could use holy magic, and she shot back that she never could. Never once touched magic, not even a little. And still, her status says she can. He told her to pour magic into her palm and chant Class 1 High Recovery. Then Luna blurted, "How do I do that?" Rick told Luna to funnel all her awareness into her hand, and she obeyed. Boom! She activated the enchanted high heel Class 1, pumping out high recovery magic. But then, poof! Nothing happened at all. She turned bright red with embarrassment and begged Rick, "Don't laugh at me!" And Rick shot his hands up fast, promising he wouldn't. It's her first try, so yeah, it makes sense. But once she practices, she'll get it down. Luna let out a heavy sigh, thinking this was her chance to finally be useful to him, and then she asked, "Is there anything else I can do?" Rick didn't even pause. He snapped that there was nothing else. Yeah, he can't just blurt out that she's got a closet perv title. Then what about his so-called affection if he misreads it, gets roasted for it, and turns into the hated guy? Worst case scenario. He better not get cocky. Yeah, but appraisal is insanely useful. He can read everyone's status at a glance, and Rick's dying to ask her to keep quiet about the fact that he can do it, because this kind of power is way too easy to abuse. All right, she gets it. She'll keep this secret even if it means dying for it. Rick flicks his hand like it's nothing, telling her straight up, talk, because if her life's at stake, she's got permission. Right then, he caught the distant call of whales and the clatter of something moving nearby. Roughly 900 meters west-southwest from where they stood. But they're not coming for you. They're steering the other way. They're racing to the moon's drop trading company. He thought their real target was Luna, assumed they wanted her gone, and believed they were trying to snatch her the representative seat. They're probably scheming something at the shop. Nothing like Japan here. No cameras watching, the streets barely have any protection, and blind spots lurk everywhere. And he can't just sit back and let it happen. He told Luna it looked like whales were in on it, and that his crew was heading straight for the moon's drop trading company. For now, he'll go hunt down both of them, no delays, but Luna grabbed his hand and insisted on coming with him. If they're planning to strike the company, she refuses to turn a blind eye. And guess what? Her mom is already at the shop. So they're really trying to split them up? If Wales' crew plans to strike Luna when she's alone, then they'd better keep her glued to him. He nodded and agreed to take her with him, then warned her loud and clear to stick right by his side. He asked for permission to carry her once more, and she nodded right away, saying yes. With her permission in hand, he scooped her up and shot forward at full throttle, using Class 2. Whirlwind, Genesis. Holy magic unleashes itself. At the same time, Wales went on a rampage inside the Moon's Drop Trading Company. With that magic tool, he tore through the world, using its roaring power to burn everything to the ground. He's convinced that with that power in his corner, no matter what hits him, he can always swing back and win. The noise hissed in his ears and forced him to step back. He slammed the flamestone into place and detonated the whole area in one violent blast. Rick sprinted flat out across the ground, clutching Luna in his arms, praying he'd reach them in time. Right as Wales was seconds from unleashing a full-blown explosion with the flamestone. Rick yanked himself up, raised his hands, and shut it down with Class 2 windshield magic. The moment his feet hit the ground, he lowered Luna and demanded out loud what Wales was planning to do to somebody's house. Wales blurted out in pure shock, staring at them like, "Where did you guys come from?" While Rick stood guard in front of Luna, who was firing off, Why would whales do something like this? Why does that even matter? Who's gonna care? The answer's crystal clear. They've pissed him off, and that's why he's mad. Whales clicked his tongue because watching her and Zaji, her so-called father, act like saints made his stomach churn. That's why he cut him loose. Yet now his daughter is getting targeted too. And Luna just froze. Wait, did he really say he got rid of her father? Whales snickered. Yeah, you heard that right. Yeah, he was blocking his rise to representative, so he made him vanish. He masked it as a bandit strike, made them erase him completely, and somehow she survived. Rick had that sinking feeling all along. Turns out, it really was the whales who orchestrated the bandit attack. And on top of that, he's the one who killed Zaji. Luna clenched her fist and snapped at the whales with pure rage. Whales wept, tears pouring down her face, and the laughter only roared louder. He grinned and swore he'd keep her as his slave. She snapped at him. Don't be ridiculous. There's no way I'm going to become the slave of the man who murdered my father. Seriously, how rotten can this guy possibly be? Right then, a dagger slashed into Rick's side out of nowhere. Yet he caught it at the last second and shoved it away before it could finish the job. But it was the noise that launched it. Whales's outburst was just a smokescreen, so Noise could slip in and strike without a clue. Rick snapped at Luna to get behind him and fired magic with his left hand. Throwing weapons, huh? Yeah, what a pain of a skill. He'd rather start by causing a little noise first. Rick raised an appraisal on him, and that's when it hit. The Noise wasn't harmless at all. It was an assassin. Because, come on, isn't that title basically made for striking in the dark? Then Rick clocked something even crazier. He'd never seen skill-level magic item use like this, and he couldn't ignore the stats either. So yeah, Rick decided he absolutely can't underestimate him. Deflecting those short sword strikes with defensive magic felt dangerous, so he pushed to end it fast in close quarters, and right then, more dagger noise snapped through the air. Rick smacked the attack away. Oh no, he won't let him get close. Then it's game over, because he's about to unleash long-range magic. But before he could even move, the Noise already hurled more daggers, one after another. This is getting ugly fast. Damn, his throwing skill is a real nuisance. But if it's creation holy magic, then he might still have a shot. No, he doesn't have a clue what kind of chaos it could unleash in town if he messes up. Even getting it to work isn't that simple. If he trades blows straight on with magic, he might have a shot at taking down Noise. But creation holy magic? That thing is way too brutal. Noise stared in disbelief. Rick wasn't even scratched. No wonder his crew botched the hit on Luna. Rick only smirked like he'd planned it all, boasting he was just too confident. And yeah, didn't he only have a handful of daggers? Whales said, yeah, sure, but isn't that the same guy who can't afford to show off? If even a single scratch hits him, it's game over. And Rick just froze, confused, while Noise let out a weary sigh, because seriously, what kind of troublesome master forces him to start blabbing all their cards like that? Rick froze, staring at the dagger. No way. Could it be poisoned? That's right. These daggers are smeared with venom from the terrifying great viper Paralysis Orochi, a monster only a true rank adventurer, orchestrated by a brave party, can finally take down. Because even a tiny nick will freeze his whole body in paralysis. Oh no, Rick can't pay for even one tiny blunder, and in his current state, there's no cure in sight. To knock out those abnormal status effects, he'd need holy magic at least class 6, though he could try cooking up a brand new class 6 status recovery spell with creation magic if he had the mana to pull it off. At the very least, if he had paralysis resistance, he could flip that status effect around and shut it down. Noise flashed a cruel smirk, asking what was wrong, while Rick's attacks kept swelling bigger, and Rick cursed under his breath, fighting off dagger after dagger that kept coming. He might have to try out his shield. Then he went for class 2 windshield magic, and a dagger still slipped right through. Rick shoved it off almost instantly. Then the shout of the clash lit up the air, and daggers swarmed, all insisting he was lucky he didn't get skewered even after his shield shattered. Lucky? Nah. Rick was already flying into impact, throwing up his shield to stop it. But that's the proof. Magic shields can't block that skill. Luna swallowed her pride and apologized. Because, yeah, it was her fault for tagging along. Rick only flashed a calm, reassuring smile, like he was about to prove a point. He'd shut down those noise dagger attacks with zero trouble, so she had nothing to worry about. Yep, behind him lurks the one person he can't afford to fail, someone he has to protect with everything he's got. If Luna catches him looking weak, it's over. So he steels himself and stands tall, just to reassure her. If he keeps slamming every attack back like this, one day those daggers will hit their limit. Then he only has to last a little longer. But right when he thinks the fight is finally turning his way, a woman burst out of an alley after a noise caught her attention, and when she looked up, she saw everything. Oh no, Rick forgot the simple truth. Even tucked behind a building, this is still smack in the middle of the city, so there could be someone nearby at any second. The woman bolted from the danger in pure terror, screaming for help as she fled. "Help!" Noise surged. A dagger flew at her, and Luna lunged to snatch it away before it could strike. The pain hits, and without a second to spare, Rick rockets himself in front of her, intercepting the dagger before it can strike. Then, from the shadows, a second dagger slid in and slammed into his side. Wade, Wales erupted into hysterical laughter because he finally got nailed, and in his mind, that was the end of him for good. Rick clutched his side, refusing to believe he'd be finished by something like this. To his shock, his body just quit. He dropped to his knees, frozen cold and unable to move, and Luna shot over to Rick. Collapsed on the ground, he dragged out a warning, literature, while the noise of another dagger cut through the air. This time, they aimed it at Luna, right to trip her up and choke her every move. She broke free and yelled for help, and the noise finally backed off and left her alone. Because everyone wanted to settle this right here first. Next, Rick forced his body to move with everything he had, because at this rate, he and Luna were both going to die. Noise scoffed, stunned that he could still move, and that stubborn spirit of his demanded respect. Meanwhile, Wales stormed in and stomped on his face, furious that he'd ruined his whole plan to become representative. Once he's fallen this far, he's just a nuisance, so the world has to get rid of him. This time, he drove a kick straight into Rick's stomach, and Rick just crumpled there, taking the blows. So tell me, is there truly no way out? With his current strength, can he cast some spell to turn the tide? And if it comes down to magic, what's he even supposed to do? Even without it, he can still soak up magical energy, and with that power, he's still able to cast magic. So should he throw up a magic shield? Nah, if he does, Luna still gets caught in the blast. Try offensive magic instead? Forget it, it won't connect. With things this messed up, he can't even aim straight. He can't do anything, so if he snaps out here, this rampage will finally turn on Luna, and he's terrified of that. Plus, once the noise starts, skills and defensive magic stop mattering, and it still won't fix the real problem. Luna rang out to Rick to reach for her, and the second Wales heard her voice, he stopped pounding Rick and snapped his head toward her. Yeah, that hit him now. Didn't she and Zaji hate seeing other people suffer? Then fine, let her be the one to take the pain. He yanked her hair and snapped at Rick that if he hadn't closed in, he wouldn't be dying too. Now she's forced to watch Rick's death unfold. It's the truth. If Rick never met Luna, he would have never gotten his face crushed and his stomach kicked. But Luna, so kind it hurts, always worrying about everyone else, blushing at the smallest thing like she can't help it. Honestly, even though their time together was brief, she's one of the only people whose mindset matches his, and that's exactly why his answer is already locked in. And he couldn't let this disaster happen. Wales scoffed, saying, "So he's just another fake do-gooder like her. Then he should die and choke on regret." He told the noise to wipe out Rick, and the noise snapped a dagger out like it was eager, ready, and willing to do the job. He strode right up to Rick, because if he didn't have something to protect that noise, he might have lost to him. Rick spat out curses because this paralysis was the only thing stopping him. Without it, he'd never have been beaten by Wales or blasted by noise. Wales yanked Luna's hair even harder and barked at her to watch every detail. If she hadn't tried to protect that woman back then, no, if she hadn't chased the dream of becoming the city's representative, then Rick never would have died, because it was her, twisting his life until everything snapped. Watching Luna writhe in agony, she couldn't hold it in. She started sobbing. Rick's face snapped into full-on anger, sharp lines carving through his expression. They dare make her cry? These two are done. He'll never forgive them for this, and if he has to die, he's dragging them both straight down to hell with. Rick shot his hand up, fighting to unleash Class 3, Flame Arrow, Creation, Holy Magic. He's determined to scorch every last one of Noise's cells until they're nothing but ash. Noise snapped his dagger around toward his own hand, demanding to know what the hell he thought he was doing. He's not going to let him get away with misbehaving. With one brutal move, he drove the blade into Rick's wrist, sent a jolt of agony through him, and he groaned through clenched teeth. Right after that, a second blow landed on him. Even after the first paralysis wears off, the damage still clings to him, and at this rate, he won't move a single finger this time. Time's up, and next time, they'll kill him for sure. Noise caught the look on his face. Then he asked, "So after you've killed people, you get scared right before you're next? And honestly, how ridiculous is that?" He slashed Rick's cheek with the dagger, and now Rick has to act, right now. Stop and think, because he's got no choice but to figure this out fast. Before the paralytic poison surges through his veins. So that paralytic poison is really in his system, yeah, right now. And it's all because he's finally piecing it together. Now, when he's crafting stuff or leveling up his skills, he can tap creation magic with way less power if he has the right catalyst. And if he turns the paralytic poison coursing through his body into that catalyst, he can pull it off. Whales barked at Noise to speed up and wipe out Rick because the plan was to crush Luna with despair. Noise loved this kind of cruelty, tormenting whoever couldn't even move thanks to paralysis. But they were right in the middle of the city, and he had no clue when some watcher would step in. So he chose to follow Whales's orders, because if Rick grabs that dagger, his life ends and Luna gets dragged into slavery, and he refuses to let it happen. He forged the skill that crushed paralysis. Rick smirked back, then the Noise lunged at him like a dagger, only for Rick to slam it to a stop with his own hand. No way! Noise couldn't wrap his head around it. His arm shouldn't have moved at all. But it did. Fine, whatever this is, it'll still paralyze him again. Rick shot him a furious glare. Then, of course, things went bad. The paralytic poison? It no longer works. He yanked the dagger up and drove it straight into Noise's arm, making him scream in agony like it could never happen, until now, when he was finally no longer paralyzed. Rick shot up and told him, "The paralytic poison just quit working, right now." Right away, he sized himself up and realized his usable creation magic class had jumped, and he just knew that if he hit Class 5, he could forge a paralysis resistance skill. Still, it was a nail-biting close call. Just thinking about what would have happened if it failed makes him shudder. Anyway, the paralysis crushes the Noise into silence, so all that's left out there are whales. Whales barked, "Don't move!" But the moment Rick kept rolling, it was him who suddenly froze. He yanked Luna's chin and warned him, "Get back and quit moving or he'd hurt her." Yet Rick couldn't even wrap his head around being afraid of someone without a weapon. Honestly, he wanted to tear into the guy who stomped on his face and kicked his stomach. But right now, the only thing that mattered was getting Luna back safe. He warned Whales to drop Luna because he had no idea what he'd do if she didn't. But Whales ignored him anyway, and even went as far as threatening Rick, claiming Luna was in his hands. Even with his hands shaking, he's unarmed, and every move of his is a crack Rick can smash through. Rick's got this. He hurled a dagger at Whales, and it sliced straight into his stomach. Whales screamed like it was the end of the world. Wait, is he really overdoing it? It's barely even a drop of blood. Whales screamed in agony as the paralysis poison hit them, and they crumpled, finally dropping Luna. "Oh no! If this keeps going, she's about to hit the ground!" Rick bolted after her, desperate to scoop her up in his arms. Phew, so close. He's thrilled he managed to save her, because if the girl in his arms vanished, he'd be dropped straight into crushing despair. Rick fired off Class 3 healing magic on Luna's old cut, and she groaned as the pain faded, then apologized anyway. But Rick just waved it off and told her he'd done it for his own reasons. Luna sobbed, swearing that if she'd never met him, none of this would have happened. Even now, she's still locked on everyone else. She can't stand the thought that someone might get hurt because of her, and she'll probably never forgive herself. Ordinary words won't reach her, so he throws honesty straight at her. In his world, power belonged to a few, while a swarm of evil guys cheated everyone, smiled like heroes on the surface, and showed their true, rotten nature underneath. But he had no power there, so he couldn't do a thing to those villains. Luna felt certain he was powerful, and Rick shot her a grin, then barreled right back into his story. So when he arrived in this world, even more people were running wild with power, doing whatever they pleased. He figured that no matter where he went, the world wouldn't change at all. Then Luna watched him and demanded, "What is going on here?" Rick stayed silent, staring into the mess of it, replaying how his father and half-brother had crushed him and spit on his name. Sure, there were decent people out there, but in his gut, nobody felt truly safe or real. But right in the middle of it all, he finally ran into someone who thought exactly like him. Luna leaned in and demanded, "Who is that?" Her eyes flew wide as he tightened his hug. She snaps back, "It was me." And then she hits him with, "If only I hadn't met you, you'd be hurting." He's not asking anymore. He's demanding Luna stay right by his side from this moment on. And she'd finally get to know him better, because he flat out refuses to let anyone like Wales come between them. Luna's eyes filled with tears. She couldn't believe she found Rick, and now she's decided, loud and clear, that she wants to stay with him from here on out. She tore herself free of his grip and launched straight into Class 1. His healing magic blasted through the wound, and the pain finally started to melt away. Right now, she's still dragging everyone down, but at least she can pull this off. She sealed the wound tight, and even with Class 1, she healed that far, just like divine magic was supposed to. Rick grabbed her hand and blurted, "You're incredible," because now she's finally using magic the right way. He was grateful she healed him after that brutal pain, and Luna's fingers softened against his cheek as the cut vanished. Then she promised she'd undo every wound he still carried from before, and he wouldn't regret meeting her ever again. With those words ringing in his ears, Rick can keep pushing himself from here on out, no matter what kind of opponent shows up next. Luna lit up with a bright smile, thanking Rick for helping her, and honestly, she was absolutely stunning. As expected, that smile looks made for her, so he swore, deep in his heart, that he'd never let it fade again. At the Grand Dine Empire, when the Chancellor, Marius, spotted Sasha von Gartenberg from the Heroes Party, he immediately knew Heinz had botched his third dungeon conquest attempt. That's right. Just when they added a holy magic user, the floors that the last party shredded with ease suddenly turned vicious, forcing them to back off and retreat. She dropped to her knees before Emperor Exile von Grandane and declared, without a shred of doubt, that Rick's impact on Heinz's hero party was huge, powered by Heinz's past victories. Marius practically stared in disbelief, because this was nothing like what he'd heard. And then he snapped, "Where's Rick now?" Sasha said Rick got hauled out of the party and kicked from the Viscount family, but for now he's in Zurich in the Jilt commercial nation, his mother's homeland. She swore that talent like that across the border would be a disaster for the Empire, and Marius stared up at the Emperor, saying Viscount Gold's own territory showed he'd been banished for one reason. He'd been selling the Empire's secrets to nearby countries. Sasha stood up for Rick, swearing he'd never pull that kind of stunt. Then the second she clocked they were standing before the Emperor, her pride vanished and she blurted an apology on the spot. And Marius turned to Excel and asked what they were supposed to do next. And that later thought, too, that if they swung at each other just once, they'd finally know what they were really dealing with. Then Marius will dispatch an envoy, Waltz, the man who sits at number 3 in the Imperial Intelligence Division. Back in Zurich, the whale's chaos and the loud commotion finally spilled into action. Whales and a handful of guards got hauled away and arrested. The crisis finally got shut down, and everyday life snapped back in Zurich like nothing ever happened. 10 days slipped by since that moment, and Rick sat on the edge of his bed pouring magic into jars of salt, because in his head, he's decided creation magic is only meant for this. He was so laser-focused on saving Luna that he pulled salt from the original world, but if he tried to summon anything else too, it would have wrecked both his time and his mana. And if he keeps inventing wild, unknown stuff and drawing eyes to himself, he's basically signing up to make enemies he never asked for, especially once the nobles find out and start demanding this and that. So from here on out, he'll use creation magic only for his own life or his family, or only when he's truly desperate. Still, when Noise's paralysis poison struck, panic ripped his composure apart. With enough mana and a higher tier in creation magic, he could have forged healing status ailment spells or built resistance skills, no catalyst needed. Right now, he's laser-focused on leveling up his creation magic class and cranking up his mana pool, because leveling is the fastest route. But he can't help wondering if there's a perfect hunting ground out there waiting to be found. Right when he bolted out of his room, he clutched a box of salt like it was urgent. Maris told him Luna stopped by even though she was swamped, and Luna tried to wriggle out of it, insisting she was only checking in to see how Karen's shop was doing. Maris giggled and instantly understood. Luna came because she was worried sick about Rick's condition. All right then. She'd slip away for now and give them some space. Rick strode up to Luna and thanked her for worrying about him. But now, he's completely back to normal. Support magic recovery still couldn't touch this level of damage, so it all came down to her holy magic, and she's honestly just relieved she could help. Still, she couldn't shake the thought. If only she could use magic better, everything would have been so much easier. She was struggling with the same thought, like her power just wasn't cutting it. Luna spun away, cheeks burning as she hurriedly apologized for feeling low right outside the shop. And they just watched Mary step up to greet every customer. The shops in Zurich are booming because of Rick's salt, and yeah, that's great, until you see that mile-long line of customers and realize he totally dumped way too much. The townspeople should team up and make everything bloom, and Luna's clearly pushing for the same thing. He's itching to use his power to make that happen. Right then, he spotted a man standing there, asking everyone about the salt. At this hour, a lone male customer is almost unheard of. He's got the look of an adventurer, but who knows, maybe he's just hunting for souvenirs. Luna leaned in and asked Rick what was wrong, but Rick waved it off like it was nothing, claiming he was just stuck in his own thoughts. Then he leaned in and asked if she knew any killer spots around town to level up. Whoa, she was seconds from heading to the town hall. So, would he want to tag along with her? The deputy representative could be sitting on the truth, so if that's the case, Rick would gladly charge in and get it. He trailed right after her as the male customer stared at them from over his shoulder. Once they finally reached the town hall, they didn't waste a second. A guy with glassy eyes stepped forward, flashed a greeting and announced, "I'm Harris, the deputy representative," then gripped Rick's hand hard. He was genuinely grateful for Rick's help with the election mess. What's there to brag about? Rick just couldn't stand corruption. Harris smirked the moment he heard it. Now he'd actually have to team up in this room with that rough whale? Whoa, that was seriously an honest guy. Then Rick snapped his head to Luna and warned that she couldn't be underestimated either, because she showed up with a guy that looked way too perfect. Luna shot back, confused, saying she didn't really get what he was saying, but she could tell it wasn't meant kindly. And when she called him Harris's uncle, Rick went even more lost, because Harris has known Zaji, Luna's father, and the former representative for ages, and their connection goes way, way back. Either way, he's convinced Zaji is over the moon that Luna finally became the representative. Right, get them a seat, and if they want, bring out your specialty grapes. Sounds like Zurich is where those grapes are grown. Rick dropped onto the couch and snatched a piece of food. Luna slid in beside him and spilled the whole story to Harris about Rick. She was asking for help leveling up, and while that was happening, Rick leaned in and asked about the best hunting spots. Harris pushed his glasses up and said, "Guess we ended up here instead of the Adventurers Guild." That choice was the perfect one, because these town adventurers are rotten to the core, and Luna practically pleaded with him not to say it like that, while Rick leaned in, dying to know what she meant. Harris laid it out. Since Zurich sits so close to the Empire, the moment the pay's better, the real pros flood to the Empire for the same job. So all that's left here is either low-level adventurers who can't hack it, or troublemakers who can't get out of town for one reason or another. Luna yanked herself upright, snapping at him for pushing it too far. But Harris shrugged off her outburst and marched on anyway, because right now, the guild's basically frozen, and he's fine taking them around himself. Finally, this could be exactly the push Luna needs. So Rick snapped his head toward her and asked, "Are you starting something?" Yeah, she's already plotting her comeback to the trading world. To the east, Zurich faces the Granding Empire, while mountains hunker down to the south and plains and forests sprawl north and west. Yet lately, monsters have surged, and now the only lifeline for trade is that eastward route to the Empire. First, she's considering sending subjugation requests for the monsters in the northwest, and Rick can't help wondering, are there any targets out there for her to go after? Turns out, there it is. The Queen Ant. A colossal ant, its body at least 3 times taller than an adult man. Sure, the size is terrifying, but what's truly worrying is how insanely fast it can reproduce. Fresh soldier ants keep spawning, endless as the swarm, no matter how many the heroes cut down. One by one, countless parties get chewed up and wiped out, and like Harris warned, they can't bank on the adventurers to save them. So they were desperate to steal a boost from a former hero party member's power. Luna looked genuinely stunned, and Rick's face snapped cold. So he knew. Oh yeah, because this is a commercial nation, so intel from everywhere funnels right into the same place. Harris already had way more inside info on Rick than Hines did, and Rick looked genuinely uneasy. So what the heck did this guy actually know about him? Luna whipped around, shocked to find out Rick used to be in the heroes party, and Rick shot her an apology. He wasn't trying to keep it secret, it just felt brutal to say out loud. Luna finally got it, and just like that, everything suddenly made perfect sense. They're pushing him to do it because they trust his strength, begging him to lend his power to bring down the Queen Ant, and yeah, they'll shell out a request fee too. Honestly, this is the perfect step to power up. Hold up, if he wipes it out solo, then what happens to the whole monster subjugation afterward? But wait, doesn't that mean he's about to yank the Adventurers Guild's last few requests? That's exactly what happened when he made the salt. This isn't just about lining his pockets, it's about powering up their confidence too. So tell me, what's the real plan? Then Harris leaned in and grilled Rick, asking what he thought. And right after that, Rick nodded and agreed to take it on. For now, they could shove the payment to the side, but he still needed the monster count and where they were, so he asked if he could scout first. Harris turned to Luna, and she agreed on the spot. All right then, they'll hand him a guide right away. The very next day, Rick shot out to scout, hugged his mom with a quick goodbye, then turned to his grandpa and thanked him for the fresh gear. Karen seized praise for Dago as he panicked, frantically trying to restart everything. Restocking their shop, and he was painfully shy. Classic tsundere, huh? The second Rick showed up at the meeting spot, he scanned the area like crazy, hunting for the guide. But then he spots Luna, right there. She smiles and says, "Good morning." And the second he sees that giant suitcase, he's like, where's she headed with all that? Wait, is she the guide? That's it. All right then, let's go. But Rick couldn't shake the thought. Was it really okay for the town's representative to guide him personally? Still, she waved it off and said, "It's totally fine." So yeah, it was totally fine. Luna, the brand new representative of Zurich, refused to let the town's trade stay dead. Monster hordes had choked the main routes, and so she teamed up with Rick to hit Form, a brutal queen ant nest guarding the trade vein, and before they launched the real fight, they decided to scout the danger first. Rick shoved all their gear into his dimensional storage, the wild new magic he'd just figured out. And with that, they kicked off their journey. Then Rick hit the truth on the trail. Harris, the deputy rep, had greenlit Luna's role out in the field, and she'd volunteered to guide them herself. Consumed by one goal, get stronger, level up, and protect herself instead of dragging her friends down, she finally won over Harris, and he gave in, trusting she'd stay safe as long as Rick kept her under his protection. Rick fired her up, swore they'd grow stronger side by side, and pointed out her hidden gift for holy magic. Luna clenched her resolve and vowed she'd throw everything into the job. As they burst closer to the target territory, a wild swarm of monsters suddenly burst out and ambushed them, leading Rick to conclude safe trade was basically impossible under these conditions. But as they pushed deeper, monster encounters vanished almost completely. Luna swore they'd finally crossed into the ants' true territory, which Rick confirmed, saying their destination was right around the corner. Because even with the queen kept out of sight, Rick could still spot a swarm of about 200 soldier ants nearby. Proof Formy was there. Luna's eyes widened in pure shock at the massive tide of enemies crashing toward them. Rick steadied her and laid out a plan. Target lone ants one by one so she could train for what came next. He snapped his blade into a dagger. He handed it to her like it was her brand new weapon, swore she had to carry an antidote on her at all times, and when Luna finally asked what he had himself, he wouldn't dodge the question. Rick tore open his dimensional storage and pulled out what he needed. He chose the assassin's old weapon as the spark, then slammed it into his Genesis magic, his Class 2 creation, activating everything with a brutal chain reaction. He forged a paralysis blade, and with it came the promise of instant control. Rick sharpened his senses and pinpointed a single, massive ant, their first target for the coming showdown. As they raced closer together, Rick quietly clocked the two real threats from soldier ants: jaws built to crush bone, and a stinger packed with a deadly toxin that hits fast. He ordered Luna to stick to the plan no matter what, then blasted her with Class 2 whirlwind magic and a strength boost, watching new energy slam into her like a fresh heartbeat. Rick lunged forward, chasing a quick win, and took down the creature so Luna could slam in the final hit. She stayed low, even as fear clawed at her, and disgust showed plain as day. Luna slammed the dagger into the ant's head. Seeing her tremble, Rick shot over to check if she was okay. She brushed it off and swore she was fine. She fired back that she wouldn't let fear freeze her forever. Rick praised her courage, then warned he'd step in if she pushed past her breaking point. Then he shoved the carcass into his dimensional storage and realized the truth. Those soldier ants weren't just prey. They were a treasure trove, from medicine-worthy fluids to armor-ready shells to stingers packed with poison. The duo kept up their ruthless grind, wiping out about 30 lone ants to crank up Luna's experience. After that, Rick told her she'd hit level 16, doubling her stats from before, and warned that with the right rest, her max health and mana would keep climbing. And her magic talent had surged all the way up to rank D. So with her holy magic climbing to Class 3 now, he was already hinting she could soon start landing offensive spells. Luna stared at the idea of casting attack magic like it didn't belong in this world. Then Rick smirked and said it fit her way better than swordplay ever did. Then he straightened up, bade them goodbye, and said he had to level himself up. Luna couldn't hide her worry, because that massive swarm he'd spotted earlier was still rattling in her head. Rick promised her he'd keep it short, and when he pictured the hit, scorching blue flames started to roar through his power. He tore through his Class 3 Flare Aerogenesis magic, firing a volley that tore the swarm to pieces. Luna couldn't stop staring, totally blown away by the spectacle. Rick, still mulling over it privately, this was his first real shot at a spell that big, leaned in and asked if the power had scared her. She shook her head, then lit up again, ready to push herself even harder. Rick squared up and went in for another brutal strike. He quickly apologized for crashing her momentum, because the destruction had set the hive off, and now an even bigger swarm of soldiers was barreling toward them. He ordered Luna to dive for cover while he wiped out the reinforcements in a flash, slamming them with another swift burst of magic. From her hiding spot, Luna held her breath and asked if the danger was gone, and Rick nodded, saying the whole immediate area was finally clear. Luna figured about 100 soldier ants were still holed up north-northwest, with their queen nesting in a nearby grove, and she immediately pinned the spot on her map, finishing their main objective. Rick's level skyrocketed, more than doubled while they were out on the excursion. He wiped out nearly 1,000 ants, earned himself a fresh title, and then, right as the victory hit, he spotted a nasty little cut on his arm. Luna fired off Class 1 high recovery magic and hauled him back from the brink. Scout results were locked in, their power shot up, and Rick pushed. "All right, we're heading back to Zurich." On the way back, Luna felt the trail suddenly turn way safer, and Rick guessed the rest of the monsters were keeping their distance, playing it cautious, like they didn't want to get too close. Luna saw it the moment Rick chose to scout instead of kill the queen. This wasn't mercy. It was a cold, smart play meant to help the local adventurers. Rick asked how she reached that conclusion, and she said, "Yeah, you could have ended it all by yourself, but you wanted everyone else to share the win." Rick challenged her sight and demanded to know what she truly saw for Zurich's future. Luna painted a town where everyone felt safe, steady, and thriving. And he pushed back hard. Did she plan to pull it off all by herself? Or did she mean to team up with the community? A warning that if the leader tries to do everything alone, it'll all come crashing down. Once that leader is gone, the people refuse to grow, and they're left totally helpless. Luna swallowed her pride and admitted she was wrong, the grief of her father's death still fresh as she remembered how it left the town wide open. Rick made it crystal clear. Keeping the trade route safe wasn't a quick job. It demanded real skill and capable people for the long haul. And with guards securing the interior, the town was desperate for fearless adventurers, because out there, the threats weren't waiting. He pushed to get Zurich's adventurers enlisted in the subjugation, so they could claw back their pride and feel like they truly mattered. And Luna was so impressed, she said he had a real knack for politics. But Rick cut that off fast. While they rested, she clocked where the Adventurers Guild was, right in the southeast district, and swore she'd drag him there as soon as they arrived. At the guild, the air felt dead and heavy, so Luna demanded the guildmaster, Mr. Garland, show up. A receptionist showed up looking totally drunk, and the woman wobbled off to grab him something, because he needed help right now. Leaving Rick stuck watching the whole scene, he frowned as he spotted plenty of adventurers already passed out or knocked back with drinks. Way too early for that. It was a stark clash with the Imperial Guild's own professional standards. It proved Harris right. Those local adventurers had rotted from the inside out. A tipsy adventurer sneered at the fancy town official and at the man she dragged along with her. Luna kept her cool and snapped that she had business to settle with Garland. The adventurer smirked, like he was daring anyone, claiming he could take care of any adult business on his own. Rick stepped in front of her, privately realizing that winning over this cynical crowd was going to be a brutal uphill fight. The adventurer, calling himself Dice, let out a sneer at the two of them, basically saying adult fun would have flown straight over a kid's head. He said it didn't matter how many times the town officials came back, talk like that was just wasted breath, and he'd already told Harris the same thing. Nobody was signing a contract they couldn't actually win. A jittery adventurer named Hero hurried up and quietly snapped a warning to Dice. Don't talk to the representative like that. Seething with rage, Dice demanded an answer, what the hero was planning, right now. He stood up, swung a kick at the young man, and barked for the brat to get out of the conversation. Luna bolted to Hero's side, frantically checking if he was okay. Rick slid right in front of the now-seated Dice. When Dice finally staggered back up and asked if Rick had an issue, Rick snapped back that it would be beneath him to pretend he hadn't just seen Dice low-handedly injure Hero. Dice snapped back, insisting he teamed up with the E-rank kid on the deal that every command had to be obeyed and nobody else should butt in. Rick just nodded. Yeah, he knew he was the outsider, but he wouldn't stand by while someone got kicked for no reason and act like it wasn't his problem. Snapping at Rick for acting so high and mighty, Dice snatched his weapon and slung it over his shoulder. Rick studied Dice's stats in total silence and clocked him as a full-on power warrior. But Rick knew beating Dice just through brute strength wouldn't shake the other adventurer's mindset. Behind him, Luna hurled Class 1 high recovery magic, sealing the hero's wounds with pure healing. Dice let out a heavy sigh at the display, snickering at how meddlesome healing magic always feels. But once Hero was finally mended, there was no reason left for anyone to complain. Rick snapped back that if Dice's logic was real, Rick could beat him into a pulp and just heal him afterward, like it never happened, while Dice insisted he was trying to settle it the easy way, and then asked if Rick was that hotshot adventurer Harris kept bragging about, right before Rick cut in and asked what would happen if he were. Dice clicked his tongue, annoyed and impatient. A young voice snapped that the whole mess was rigged for Rick's big entrance, insisting the adventurers were nothing but disposable pawns to wipe out over 1,000 soldier ants in a suicidal strike. Rick swore he'd never let that kind of tragedy happen again, but Dice snapped back, telling him to stop and listen to reason. Rick insisted that if numbers were the problem, his support magic would give them the power to brawl without even breaking a sweat. Guilt exploded into laughter when Rick insisted, brushing the whole thing off like it was just a joke. Luna snapped into action, defending his magic as incredible, but the adventurers sneered at her judgment and warned that if she could be so easily swayed, the town's future was doomed, and Luna's rage started to boil. Rick made the decision to bring receipts and prove it. He sprinted up to Hero and demanded his help. He demanded Dice step up and face Hero in an arm wrestling showdown. Hero snapped that this wouldn't even be a fair fight, but Rick grinned and swore he'd back him with support magic. And then he tossed out a bet. If Hero won, Rick would throw his weight behind the Queen Ant's subjugation. Dice laughed at the notion of an E-rank brat beating a B-rank like him, calling it stupid. And then Hero yanked Rick into a corner. Frantically, he demanded to know what Rick was doing, because he was sure he couldn't win, and he was terrified Dice would come after him next. Then Rick shot back an apology for all the pressure. He told her that Hero was the only person he could trust with this, and when he pointed out that Hero was young, it didn't sound like a weakness. It sounded like he already knew there was a real reason this kid chose to become an adventurer. Hero finally admitted he needed money fast to help his sister, and even though he wasn't pulling in much yet, he was betting that staying close to someone tough like Dice would pay off in time. Rick clapped a hand on Hero's shoulder and swore the guild had to change, because these members were totally checked out and nobody was pushing themselves anymore, and treated Rick and Harris like total outsiders, until Rick snapped, "If Hero's really on our level, show genuine strength, and it might finally snap them awake." Rick even admitted to himself he picked Hero for a reason, that rare title, Small Courage. Once that spark of courage caught fire, he was sure the guild would march behind the heroes. With heart pounding, the hero nodded and agreed to the match. Rich slammed Class 2 strength magic onto himself and powered up like a total beast. Then Hero stepped up and dared Dice win the fight, and Dice would have to swallow that subjugation request. Dice rose with a grin and swore he'd crush both Hero's cocky swagger and his arm. Garland, the guildmaster, pushed through the noise and demanded to know what the heck was going on. They told him an arm wrestling showdown was already happening, one match to decide whether the guild would even accept the subjugation quest. Dice mocked the old man and dared him to watch Hero's final moments as an adventurer. He vowed that if the kid lost, he'd get kicked out of the guild for good. In the crowd, a curly-haired adventurer tried to lure a kid into a bed with a man named Waltz, but his buddy snapped, warning him not to scam anyone. Dice was the toughest warrior there, so Garland brushed it off as pure foolishness, and then, to his shock, the hero swallowed the terrible terms and declared, with total certainty, that he couldn't afford to lose. The two of them planted their feet and locked in their positions. Dice snapped at the boy not to shed a tear after losing, but right as the signal hit, the outcome hit like lightning. Our hero crushed the veteran without breaking a sweat, and they both smashed through a wooden barrel with a brutal crack. He grabbed them and slammed Dice's arm hard into the ground. The guild went dead silent, like the whole room froze. Even Hero looked stunned by what he'd just done, barely breaking a sweat before he blurted out, "Dice, are you okay?" The receptionist's official verdict named Hero the winner, and the adventurers just couldn't wrap their heads around it. How did an E-rank kid beat a B-rank monster? Garland demanded answers, and Hero shot his finger at Rick, claiming he'd only won because of Rick's support magic. Then Rick told the guildmaster that Hero's raw muscle power had been boosted to about 3 times its usual strength. Dice shot up, swearing up a storm and barking for a rematch. Garland barked at him to grow up, then declared the match over like it was settled. Hero happily basked in the joy of the fact that he'd finally step into the biggest monster hunt of them all. Dice snatched him by the collar, and his face turned ice cold. He snapped that Hero's goal better be worth risking his life for money, then pressed the real question. What happens to his sister if he doesn't make it? Dice snapped his attention to Garland, firing back that they couldn't toss a child into a nearly guaranteed death trap or shrug him off as a disposable pawn. He snapped a warning at them. Remember, you're up against a queen and over 1,000 soldiers, and Rick cut in fast, telling them he'd already wiped out most of them on his scouting run that morning. Dice snapped at him for talking nonsense, then Luna shoved forward to back up the accusation. Daring Rick to prove it, Dice demanded he show the remains. Rick checked with a receptionist and confirmed the guild would buy the monster parts to rip the carcasses out of his dimensional storage and bring them crashing into the world. At first, with just 2 dropped, the dice practically laughed in his face. Then the battle turned brutal. Soldier ants stacked up in heaps, and the floor got flooded with their bodies. The receptionist looked totally swamped and confessed the guild's money couldn't pay for the haul on the spot, but she swore she'd team up with the Commerce Union to seal the deal. Rick shoved the materials back into storage. Luna strode up to the seated Dice and leaned in, telling him he'd now witnessed the power of support magic and the proof that they're moving forward. Then she asked again for his help. Dice went dead quiet, finally realizing they weren't just pawns anymore. Rick told the adventurers loud and clear that they were going to step up and become the town's heroes. Luna then made it crystal clear. Whether trade could restart or not hinged completely on what they did. She bowed her head and begged them for their strength, so the roads stayed safe long after the queen was gone. The adventurers started to waver as the representative's humility disarmed them, and the thought of going toe-to-toe with Rick's magic lit a dangerous excitement in their hearts. The Dice finally gave up and relented. He made sure Rick understood one brutal rule. If even one of his men died, Rick wouldn't just lose a fight, he'd pay for it with his own life. Luna didn't just join the mission, she staked her own life on it, swearing there was no turning back. Dice kept scratching his head, utterly stunned by how intense it all felt. Finally, he snapped the guild back into gear, telling them to throw off their slump and get ready for the morning bell at the north gate, before the dice even left his hand. Steve? Rick yanked Hero's shoulder and leaned in, hinting that Dice still had one last thing to handle. He barked at the kid to stay back, because when money got involved, recklessness would get them both killed. Luna leaned in and whispered to Rick, her voice trembling as she wondered if Dice's icy attitude was just a cover to keep Hero away from danger. Garland soothed the boy's nerves and promised him, "Don't worry, there'll be plenty more jobs coming." The very next morning, Luna stepped up and fired up the entire crew gathered at the north gate. She made it crystal clear. If they wiped out the queen and her soldiers, Zurich's fate would finally be decided. But she put their safety first, pushing everyone to head home. No excuses, just go. The expedition kicked off, and right as they closed in on the last soldier ants, the whole mission turned deadly. The adventurers stared in pure disbelief, like they couldn't even blink at what they were seeing, stunned by how effortlessly they sliced straight through the monsters. Even Waltz, staring at his own hands after he split an ant in two, couldn't believe how massive Rick's power was. As they closed in on the grove, Dice blurted, "Is the queen just ahead?" Rick nodded, but his detection felt different now. The ants weren't fighting at all. They were stampeding away in terror. Panic surged through him as he felt a truly terrifying aura closing in. Rick snapped and shouted for everyone to fall in behind him. Suddenly, the queen ant burst out, and she wasn't just big, she was gargantuan, 5 or 6 times a human size, dwarfing everyone as they realized the horde was way too massive for the men to handle. Rick tore into the sky with a Class 3 flare, kicking off violent aerogenesis. Scorching flame arrows blasted the swarm to pieces. and the adventurers just stood there, stunned. Rick snapped orders to the guild to finish off the stragglers. He stormed toward the queen to size up the chaos, and with his appraisal skill, he instantly nailed her name. Time for me. After the army demonized her, her presence went full nope mode. She ended up with massive magic resistance. Staring up at that massive monstrosity, Rick realized this wasn't the usual threat. It was a dangerous, abnormal variant. Rick couldn't shake the thought. How could something like this even exist when everyone said the Demon King got wiped out by a hero ages ago? This monster carried a terrifying rank and magic resistance, and it made Rick worry that the Genesis magic the goddess gave him might not stand a chance. Right as the queen ant started twitching and laying eggs, Dice and the rest of the guild burst in, only to stumble into a horrifying slaughterhouse, and Dice recoiled in pure terror. And as they asked whether the beast really ate the babies it just gave birth to, Luna got hit with pure disgust, then vomited right there on the spot. Rick finally clocked it. Those soldier ants weren't panicking at all. They were sprinting straight from their own queen. Waltz stared in shock as the queen's wounds stitched themselves shut at a totally unnatural pace, and Rick's analysis only got sharper as he realized she wasn't merely recovering. Something far deeper was happening. Her stats kept skyrocketing, and dread hit him hard when he realized the queen could, in theory, unlock endless power by endlessly devouring her own swarm. If she was allowed to keep looping like this, she'd eventually bloom into a world-ending threat, an honest-to-God demon king. Dice snapped his gaze to his comrades, weighing the danger in the air, and the others swore back. They might be weaker than their leader, but they'd throw everything they had into the fight. Bad, Dice barked for orders, but Rick froze in hesitation. At first, he told himself this mission would boost the guild's confidence and help the town. But then the truth hit him hard. He couldn't keep gambling with their lives just to chase his own dreamy ideals. He snapped to the group that everything had changed. Now they were up against something abnormal and ordered them to evacuate right now because he'd stand before the queen by himself. Dice mocked him as a fool, saying there's no way one man could take down a monster that huge, until Luna relented, knowing their getting involved would only trip up Rick's moves. Dice tried to argue back, but Walt cut him off, shouting a warning before the danger could land. The queen ant sprang into the air, clamping her mandibles shut as she brewed up a vile, rotting energy. Before unleashing a corrosive acid spray, Rick knew one single touch with that toxin would mean instant death. Death closes in as panic watches the adventurers come in. Others watched as Rick summoned Class 3 Windshield Genesis magic. He conjured a shimmering wind dome, snapping it into place to deflect the spray. They burst in, only to slam into a wall of towering insect bodies, their escape route completely cut off. Dice rasped out a tough apology, finally admitting they should have listened to Rick's warning from the very beginning. Rick snapped at him to stop replaying it in his head. He fired up his attack and unleashed Class 3 Flare Aerogenesis to blast the queen. With a Class 2 Whirlwind spell, they shoved the massive beast back hard, carving out a path just as the group finally started pulling away toward Zurich. Luna whispered a prayer to the goddess, begging her to keep him safe, and Dice yelled, "Stay alive!" All by himself, Rick stared at it and realized his magic volleys weren't landing. They were getting chewed up by its resistance again and again. So he ditched the spells, fired up Class 2 Whirlwind, and cranked Genesis magic with a power boost to hammer his body with raw force. The queen ant's voice dropped into a gut-deep roar as she spat out "kill" over and over, and Rick watched her evolve at a terrifying pace. If this demonized creature was what it truly was, he had to end the whole encounter, right now, no delay. Just recently, he shot himself into the sky, like gravity didn't stand a chance. He barely jerked out of the way as one of the queen's massive limbs came crashing down at him. Limbs surged upward, stretching into a terrifying position above her. He slammed her head with everything he had, so hard that the impact shattered his own blade. The queen swirled concentrated poison in her mouth, eyes sharp and cold as she prepared what came next, and blasted it straight at him, while Luna watched from afar, her heart crumbling with worry. Rick burst out of the clouds, totally unscathed. He slammed his fist down and declared the fight was finished. With a brutal surge, he lunged in and swung the blade to cut the queen's head clean off. Then the massive head crashed down right beside him and hit the ground with a hard, solid thud, even after his head was ripped clean off. The creature's head stayed aware for a split second, panicking as it couldn't make sense of why its poison didn't work, and Rick just smirked about how legendary insects are for taking hits. He admitted it. During that scouting run, he purposely let a soldier ant sting him, all to forge poison resistance like he'd done with paralysis. And yeah, he pulled it off, crafting a working countermeasure. Rick asked me if she really understood what demonized even meant. But the dying queen could only gasp that everything felt different, right before the light vanished from her eyes. Alone in the grove's choking silence, Rick decided he'd dig into the truth of demonization later. He realized he couldn't drag that mess back to town, so he threw himself into crafting a brand new spell. He managed to cage the corrosive acid in a separate pocket of extra-dimensional space right next to the queen's corpse, and he couldn't help but grin at how ridiculously easy magic made it. Magic crackled in the air. Then the moment the adventurers sprinted back to him, Rick waved with pure relief, grateful everyone was safe. Hidden behind a nearby tree, a man watched in silence, unseen by Rick, while the stranger murmured to himself, spotting him as the one Altena, the goddess of light, reincarnated. Light flared bright, then vanished in the blink of an eye. Waltz told Rick straight up that he was ready to leave. He refused the reward and flat out admitted it. He'd ultimately done nothing to turn the battle. Luna flashed him a heartfelt thank you for his help and told him to reach out if he ever swung through Zurich again. Then Rick thrust his hand forward as Waltz grabbed it, grateful to the last second. Waltz replayed Prince Hein's reports in his head, calling Rick useless, until Rick's blade work was flawless and his body tanked lethal toxins like they were nothing. And Waltz snapped shut the doubt. The prince's story had to be a lie, because a queen aunt wasn't a threat you tossed at a mere A-rank party. Marty was Walt's muse, and Rick pulled off that performance like a full-on hero. Even while Rick swore, with a humble grin, that he was just an F-rank adventurer, Waltz walked off smiling, and Dice's jaw dropped because Rick's official rank was even lower than his. 2 weeks later, Dice marched Rick straight to Dworak's weapon shop, a dwarven hideout, to hunt down a brand new replacement for his shattered sword. Inside, the shopkeeper Dworak snapped out a challenge. Rick had to earn the right to buy a weapon by spotting the single most valuable item in the room. Eric slammed his appraisal skill to life. He picked out the necklace Dworak was wearing, an orichalcum masterpiece, forged from the god's hardest metal, blessed with equality and worth 10 platinum coins, which is about a whopping 1 billion yen. Dice blurted that this was cheating, but Dworak snapped back that his instructions said to use anything in the room. Amazed, the dwarf hurried into the next chamber to seal a deal for 3 gold coins. Rick counted it in his head, 3 million yen, and let out a quiet breath of relief, thankful for the reward he'd earned from the Queen Aunt's subjugation. When Dworak shoved the weapon in front of Rick, the world went quiet, because it was Kazanagi's sword, a mithril blade packed with a magic stone from the legendary Bird Rock. This A-rank monster let the wielder steer the wind by feeding mana into it, and it carried a price tag of 3 platinum coins, about 300 million yen. Rick stared at the price and thought, there's no way this should cost just 3 gold coins. But Dworak insisted that a sword only truly matters once it's swung, and he threw his trust behind someone whoever truly understood its worth could wield it like a weapon. And when Rick threw out his thanks, a jealous Dice started spinning, desperate to pick the next weapon to steal. And Dworak just shut him down cold, flat out refusing to sell him a single thing, as he tore back to the guild. After the subjugation, the adventurers met Rick with fresh awe, bowing and thanking him like he'd just earned their lives. With their ranks swelling in confidence, more and more of them could now punch down orcs on their own, or shut down danger creeping near the city. Once the deal with the northwestern town finally kicked back off, Rick lit a fire under them. Time to gear up for escort duty. And the adventurers jumped at it, desperate to repay Rick for everything he'd done. Garland strode up and hailed Rick as the great hero who killed the queen ant, even though Rick begged him to drop the title. Garland bowed low and proclaimed that Rick didn't just beat the monsters. He lifted the whole town's adventurers like a spark, reigniting their courage. Then he marched Rick into a private room to finish paying up for the soldier ant materials. Hands him a platinum coin stamped with a jaw-dropping 100 million yen. Rick's hand shook violently as he snatched the coin. He tipped his hat to the guildmaster for the smooth exchange, then leaned in and asked for one last favor. While the hero was busy sweeping the guild, Dice slid up with a tempting offer: apple picking. He couldn't meet the boy's eyes as he said the truth. Out in the fields, the hero would make more than scrubbing the guild. But, watch out, those gathering jobs could turn dangerous fast. The hero's eyes lit up like fireworks as he accepted it. Down in the forest south of Zurich, Dice grabbed Rick and demanded he spot the real, shining fruit trees. With his appraisal skill, Rick zeroed in on the exact trees in sight and then flagged the ones farther back, too. The hero jolted as he saw it. Those trees weren't real at all. They were mimicry tree ants, monsters that copy vegetation, and they regenerate so fast you can barely kill them. As they scrambled up the trees, Dice bragged that it was insanely convenient to have someone who could feel presences, and Rick demanded, "So I'm just being used?" But Dice waved him off, saying Rick was still getting a full 60% of the profits. Hero lit up and thanked Rick for the chance, and Rick grinned, saying the boys were suddenly way more upbeat and they gladly took the praise. Dice told Hero to grab the fruit softly, because every single one could fetch 3 silver coins, or 30,000 yen, and Rick couldn't believe how pricey it all was. But Dice broke it down. Turns out the rarity stayed rare because the mimicry trance jammed up most people before they could even make it to the market. Dice told them to cut straight through the monsters and clear the path so they could grab the fruit anytime they wanted. Rick shut that idea down, saying the monsters were a built-in warning sign. If you tried to strip the bear, they'd come for you. The hero nodded and insisted that the mimicry trance was exactly why that fruit grew so wildly strong. The receptionist was totally swamped by the sheer wave of... They'd stacked a mountain of glowing fruit, the kind that looked like it was lighting up the whole place. Just as Hero shouted that there was still more coming, the receptionist crumpled to the floor, sobbing that the request had no cap, but a wave this huge would slam the market price into the ground, and she couldn't handle it by herself, so she bolted to find backup. Dice swore to Rick it wasn't their fault, but Rick shot back that Dice totally went too far. Garland didn't hold back. He tore into Hall for wrecking the market, yet the guild still went ahead and processed the payment. Dice slid into a seat at the desk and started tallying the proceeds, practically stunned as he counted it all. He'd never seen this much money piled in one spot. When the total hit, it came to 30 gold coins. Rick then did the math in his head and realized it was about 3 million yen. And that figure seriously crushed the reward for the Queen Aunt's subjugation. The hero clutched one shiny gold coin, staring at it like it was a miracle, and admitted it was the first time he'd ever even held one. Then the dice rolled out their deal, 60% to Rick and 20% each for him and the hero. Rick caught it instantly. Dice kept sneaking his own portion smaller just to hand the boy a bigger share. Rick shoved his own portion over to Hero, too, then said he'd chip in a slice of his earnings for the kid. Hero stared, totally confused. "Why are you guys being this generous?" While Dice snapped, "So what was the point of that first split if you're just handing the money back?" Rick locked eyes with Dice and smirked like he already knew, and the older adventurer instantly snapped, "Stop staring!" With his heart overflowing, his whole body shaking, Hero thanked them both again and again. With that money in hand, he swore he could finally snatch his sister back. Meanwhile, inside the Grandine Empire, Waltz marched up and shoved his official report into the king's hands. Prince Heinz stared in disbelief, brushing off the whole claim as pure nonsense, then snapped, "Since when did the word hero start getting handed out like it's cheap?" So it got handed out for wiping a single queen ant. Walt didn't flinch, and with respect, he made it clear that Rick had taken down something way bigger and far deadlier than any normal one. As Sasha put it, the hero party's wins under Heinz came mostly from Rick's muscle and heart. Rick even backed it up by swearing those old Rick's incompetent reports were the only falsehoods he'd ever uncovered. And when Hines blew up in a fury, he screamed that Rick was nothing but a useless pack mule. Sasha snapped back with a sharp technical point. If support and holy magic share the same class, support is usually weaker. But Rick's support magic hit like a truck, landing several times harder than holy magic of the same rank. A suspicion gnawed at her, one she could swear Hines felt more sharply than anything during their fights. She then let it slip. Rick could pull off two totally different support spells at the same time, a trick only top cardinals usually get to use. Hines's jaw locked tight, and rage boiled as he snapped out Sasha's name. The king finally snapped and spoke straight to Hines, calling out that the prince had totally misread Rick's strength, then pressing hard to name the real weakling, the one who couldn't do a thing alone, while Hines scrambled, panicking, trying to insist he was being set up. Right then, the king snapped him off mid-sentence and told Hines to get out of the palace, go wherever he wanted, casting him out of the empire for good. Right on the edge of the Grandine Empire, Hines, now stripped of his noble clothes, dressed like any common fool, snapped and screamed curses into the sky as a pack of monsters surged in from all sides. He spat the king's and Rick's names through clenched teeth, pure venom dripping with every word. He crushed them with insults, calling them fools for missing his real potential. In his darkest desperation, every old obsession with status and dignity crumbled away, until all that was left was one frantic, burning hunger for power. The moment the first wolf drove its teeth into his leg, they surged behind him in a rush as the rest of the pack closed in, and he screamed for the power to break every last one who dared to wrong him. Meanwhile, back in Zurich, Rick and Hiro strolled side by side toward the city center, and Rick pressed for answers about Hiro's sister. He spoke about her like she was pure kindness, a selfless soul who just didn't know when to stop being laid back, even when it hurt. She was the only family he had left, a woman who never complained, never snapped, and never let anger touch her. Hiro's voice turned heavy as he admitted it. She'd sold herself into slavery on purpose, just to scrape together the money he needed to keep surviving. Rick could feel the deep bond they shared, and he knew her sacrifice wasn't just bravery. It proved she valued his life more than anything. Kiro agreed with a bright grin, already counting down to their reunion that was closing in at full speed. Their hope crashed hard at the slave merchant's office. An emotionless receptionist apologized for days gone wrong and told them Iris had only just been bought, when she flat out refused to spill the buyer's identity. Rick thought about tracking her down, but the moment he tried to piece things together, he realized they had zero real leads. While the Grandine Empire and the neighboring Zagat Kingdom treated slaves like property, the joke mercantile nation somehow gave them a small sliver of human respect. It made it impossible to pin down the buyer from the treatment alone, so they knew they had to hunt down a master who could read the area like local intelligence. Rick hustled Hiro to Harris, and the deputy rep greeted them like he already knew they were hunting for answers. Rick felt genuinely impressed, but his stomach still tightened at how fast Harris had connected him to that huge anonymous stash of platinum coins that hit the town just recently. Harris said he'd help, but only if you came through with a favor for him first. He wanted Rick to sit down with the next guest coming in. Rick didn't hesitate and agreed to the terms. And Harris snapped his focus to the hero. In Jilk, he confirmed it. Every slave contract gets officially filed with the government, on the record. Harris spilled the truth. Narcissus bought Iris and tucked her away at his blue-roofed mansion in the heart of the Central District. Narcissus used to be a noble of the Zagat Kingdom until the crown threw him out in disgrace. A place already infamous for all the worst reasons. Harris warned them that Narcissus was rumored to see slaves as nothing but lifeless objects. When the hero demanded why the merchant would sell his sister to that monster, Harris didn't sugarcoat it. Once 8 gold coins changed hands, the deal sealed her fate and the buyer owned her outright. He told Hiro, "If you can top my offer with an even bigger sum, I might be able to buy her back." They bolted straight to the mansion without wasting a second. Narcisse greeted them like a graceful relic from the past, and Rick immediately tipped his hat with a sincere apology for showing up without warning. When the hero declared he was going to snatch his sister back, he didn't waste a second. Narcisse didn't just react. He burst into exaggerated joy, gushing that sibling love was pure. Back in the noble world he'd fled, he'd realized those real, heart-to-heart bonds didn't exist anywhere. After seeing the aristocracy's brutal backstabbing up close, Rick couldn't help but find himself agreeing with Narcisse. Greenlit the deal, but before it closed, he made it crystal clear. If they lost a worker, they'd have to pay up in compensation. He slapped a price tag of 20 gold coins on it. Rick clocked the brutal markup and couldn't tell if the guy was trying to scare them off, but Hero snapped the deal up without a second of doubt. Narcisse told them to come back the very next day. Give them time to set everything up the right way. As they tore out of the estate, Hero was buzzing, laughing that he'd crashed the second his head hit the pillow because he wanted tomorrow to show up faster. Rick shot him a grin, but he didn't let his detection skill drop for even a second. His caution paid off in the best way. Right there on the road, they found a young slave girl, collapsed and fighting to breathe. A magic collar, an evil device built to crush free will, snapped tight around her neck. Rick pressed a finger to her lips and calmed her down, shushing her hard as she fought to get the words out, swearing he'd get her somewhere safe. Right as he reached the house, Maris snapped, asking who the kid Rick was holding even was. He told her the truth. She'd face-planted on the road and begged for his mom to help get her cleaned up, so Maris nodded instantly and ordered him to lay the girl down first. Then she shifted her focus to Hero, taking one look at that bruised, beaten look on his face and ushered him inside. Into the cozy warmth of their home, Dago waved him to a seat, and Hero bowed politely, introduced himself, and even offered a real, heartfelt apology for crashing in. Rick gently settled the girl down and watched, tight-lipped, as her body told the truth. Her bones showed through her skin, screaming extreme starvation, and wheat porridge was the only cure they had for weakness like this in their world. Rick skipped the slow stuff and went straight for faster recovery. He snapped Genesis magic into play with his Class 3 creation, then conjured a special nutrient jelly in a bowl, soft on the stomach but packed with serious nutrition, even in tiny portions. Rick fed the girl bite by bite, and even though mud and grime clung to her like a curse, she still forced herself to swallow. No visible injuries, but her condition was scary as hell. So Rick fired up his appraisal skill to dig deeper. The results hit him like a truck, stunned to the bone, because the girl was no-no, a level 5 with a crazy ceiling of level 100. And then, boom, her status spills the truth. The goddess blessed her, and she's just like him, a reincarnated soul from another world, sending a gut punch through him because he realizes he's not the only one in this land. It all comes to a stop at chapter 20. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you loved this manga. Have an awesome day.